On a spacious office desk, there is a purple book with a delicately decorated cover. The sunlight shone through the window, making the appearance of this book clearer. At this moment, a hand wearing black gloves touched the book and caressed it. Subsequently, the voice of an unfamiliar man rang out in this room. There was once a great philosopher who said a sentence: "All death is the beginning of new life." It seems quite reasonable now that I think about it. This unfamiliar man is currently in a luxurious room. He sat on a spacious chair with his coat behind it. He picked up the purple book from his desk and introduced himself. "My name is Moen, and my full name is Moen Campbell. This is my current name." At that moment, the sunlight outside the window revealed the appearance of the man named Moen. He had blonde hair and a pair of blue eyes. He held his chin in his right hand and held the book in his left hand, moving gracefully like a beautiful boy. Moen went on to describe the special nature of his identity. "That's right, I'm a traveler, and my way of traveling is..." To explain why Moen became a blonde and beautiful young man, it has to start with an unexpected event in his past life. At dusk, a mischievous little cat ran onto a big road. Just as the kitten was happily playing on the road, a big red lorry was about to drive by. A girl wearing a school uniform saw this scene and immediately rushed out from the side of the road and pounced on the kitten. Moon's voice rang out. "My way of traveling is still classic and outdated." After saving the kitten, the girl held it in her arms. However, the dump truck is already heading towards the girl and the kitten. The girl tightly hugged the kitten, knelt on the ground, and looked at the large truck in front of her in shock, already at a loss. However, the protagonist in this scene is a girl. What is the connection between this and Moen? Halfway through the story, Moen suddenly popped out of the frame. He tilted his head and looked ahead, as if wondering if the audience had any questions about the scene description above. Why is the person above a girl? No, brother. Returning to the scene just now, the driver of the dump truck noticed that someone had not had time to escape, so he suddenly turned the steering wheel to avoid them. However, unfortunately, the dump truck crashed into a dirt wall next to the road. And because of this violent impact, the big lorry has burst into flames and surrounded the whole lorry. In the truck that was engulfed in flames, the driver's head was bleeding profusely due to severe injuries. Obviously, he had lost consciousness and leaned against the steering wheel. His body was also surrounded by flames. That's right, this male with yellow hair and wearing blue work clothes is Moon's past life. This is me, the truck driver who drifted and slammed himself into a wall to create death to avoid saving a little cat girl, is me. In this way, the soul of Moon's past life crossed from the real world into a world of light novel. So, I arrived at a world of light novels that I had been reading before my death. A magical world made up of sword and magic. The continent of Matthias. There is a very magnificent castle in front of us now. This castle is magnificent, and the decoration is very gorgeous. It belongs to the Duke of Campbell. Unlike the middle-aged corporate slave who worked tirelessly every day to make a living in my past life, I am now the only son of the 4 dukes of the empire. The Lionheart King, Grand Duke Campbell. In the castle, a blonde woman in a black halter nightgown happily hugged Moon tightly in her arms and kept stroking his head with her hand. Moon was a bit overwhelmed by the impact of her twin peaks, but was not in a position to struggle out of her embrace. A man stood silently behind them, watching their interaction with kindly eyes. The Duke and Duchess, who are considered to be of high status in this world, are my parents who love me so much. This is a brief introduction to Moon's family background. Next, Moon will introduce one by one the partners he has met. The third princess of the Empire, known as the Pure White Girl, and the future Queen of Ice. The third princess of the Empire mentioned by Moon is named Cecilia Leopold. She has long white hair and a pair of blue eyes. She was wearing a white dress that could reflect her figure, perfectly embodying the unique temperament of a princess. And this gentle and elegant princess is about to become the most important person in Moon's life. She is my future wife. She lay shyly on the ground, her eyes dodging, but there was also a hint of expectation inside. She seems to have a side that we don't know about. The girl to be introduced next is named Anna Kablin. She has long black hair with a red hair tie tied to the left of her hair. She was wearing a red student uniform, clearly a student. She lifted her cheek and looked ahead, her movements very cute. Known as the Black Witch of Santa Maria, she is a super beautiful girl who also serves as the president and librarian of the Ancient Potion Society. She is my most respected schoolmate, one level higher than me. Although she is the person that Moon respects the most, Anna, who is so lovely, actually has some unknown things. Look, she's holding a feather and gently teasing Moon lying on her lap like a puppy. She looked at him with a teasing expression. Moon held a bone in his mouth and looked at her with a wooden expression, his face looking a bit bad. Oh, by the way, it's also known as the strongest human in the world. This girl wearing a mage robe and a black dress. Her name is Mela DeMille. Although she looks relatively small, she is someone who can master various types of magic. Well, it's this little girl with white hair and red eyes. She is my mentor. She looked ahead with a teasing expression, seeming to look like she had a side to her that the others didn't know about. After introducing so many female companions around him, according to the development of the story, shouldn't Moon be the one with the protagonist's aura? However, he closed his eyes and spread his hands, muttering to himself. At this point, some people will say, "You have money and power and beautiful girls. Aren't you a definite winner in life?" He put his hand into his bangs, with a helpless expression on his face. Ha! At first, I thought the same thing, but... Suddenly, Moon opened his eyes and looked ahead with a weathered expression. I'm not the protagonist. It turned out that in this world that Moon was in, he himself was not the main character. The real protagonist was someone else. Standing here from left to right are Anna, the brave person Ariel Bugard, and the holy maiden Leah Angel. They are the true protagonists of this world. I have been following this book for 2 years, and it is a world with talented women as the main characters. The real protagonist is a girl. A girl. However, Moon is different from them. His character's setting in this world was a camp opposite to theirs. Moon walked in front wearing a gray school uniform. He was followed by some students who looked like delinquents around him. It looked like the environment of the school Moon wasn't too good. And I, Moon Campbell, am just a yellow-haired villain in this book. I am the kind of idiot that the protagonist team will inevitably encounter on their growth path, who specializes in causing destruction and giving the protagonist growth experience. I'm like the classic goblin that everyone passing by has to kill a few to train themselves. Then, Moon turned the book in his hand to a certain page, and excitedly pointed to a few big characters on the book. The words written in black ink on this page are irreversible, predicted destiny. The most frustrating thing is that this damn prophecy book told me that I couldn't change this fate. Otherwise, I would die faster. It turned out that the book in Moon's hand was the book of prophecy. Words already written down in the book meant that the person's fate could no longer be changed. Seeing that he couldn't change his predetermined fate, Moon had no other choice. He sighed, closed the book, and stood up from his seat. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. Then I have no choice but to use my trump card. Moon left his desk and sat on his arse, sitting on the sofa next to him. He lay down on the couch in a crooked position, with a tired expression on his face. He tossed the book of prophecy onto the bed behind him in one fell swoop. I've completely given up, guys. The ship will sink naturally at the bridgehead. Let me enjoy my time as a noble young master before my inevitable fate comes. Suddenly, Moon thought of such a thing. He touched his chin and looked ahead with contempt. Hey, since I was reincarnated as a noble young master, is there a possibility that a 1.75 meter tall, versatile, and super beautiful black-haired maid sister would say to me, "Young master, I like you the most. Please go out with me?" Moon thought for a moment. As the villain of this world, how could anyone like him? Realizing his character's setting in this world, he couldn't help but cover his mouth with his hand and burst into laughter. How can this be possible? The original owner of this body is the Empire's notorious, everyone crying scum. How could anyone possibly like that? At this moment, a maid walked into Moon's room. "Young master." Upon hearing the sound, Moon was a bit scared and immediately turned around to look at her. He seemed unaware that someone had walked into his room. The woman wearing a maid outfit that reflects her figure is named An. She looked at Moon and said to him seriously, "And likes young master." Moon seemed somewhat surprised by Anne's words. He closed his eyes and lightly tapped his forehead with his hand, as if trying to conceal his embarrassment. Ah, really? He doesn't know if anyone really likes him. He whispered in his heart, "I didn't expect someone to really like me." Suddenly, Anne activated his own magic. She lifted her hand forward. The red energy emanating from the surroundings enveloped her body. Subsequently, these red energies formed chains and flew towards Moon. Yes, technically, my feelings for the young master are not fondness. Moon was directly bound by these chains. He looked at the chains on his body in horror, then looked up at Anne, not knowing what had happened now. At this point, Anne continued speaking what she had just said. "It's love." Moon watched as Anne took a step towards him, feeling that the current situation seemed a little bad. While launching her magic to control the chains, Anne took her long black silk legs and slowly walked towards him. "I will fulfill all the capricious requests of the young master." She walked up to Moen and suddenly stuck one of her legs between Moon's two legs. Moen was clearly startled by her actions. "I will eliminate all the insects around the young master." So, she approached Moen, her twin peaks tightly pressed against his body. She reached out a hand and lifted Moon's chin, forcing Moen to look at her. Moen was at a loss for words, not knowing what to say for a moment, but could only stare at this maid, who was behaving strangely in front of him, and softly uttered that heavy sentence. "You become something that belongs only to me." Perhaps it was due to the use of magic that Anne exhaled a warm breath. This made Moon's face itch. She gazed at Moen with deep affection and tenderness. But little did she know, her eyes contained a strong desire to monopolize Moen, and she had long wanted to take Mu for herself. "Young master." She softly called out Moen in a tone containing special emotions. "My name is Moen Campbell. As you can see, after a car accident, I traveled from the real world to the world of light novel. When I feel pain from being stabbed by a knife, many memories flood into my mind. I turned out to be the yellow-haired villain in the novel. When I was still feeling lost because I was the villain, a purple book fell from the sky. Is this some mysterious prop? The weather today is quite sunny, with sunlight shining on Duke Campbell's castle. The clear sky and mountains set off the castle in a magnificent and towering manner. In one of the very luxurious rooms of the castle, a blond young man had just woken up and sat up from bed. He opened his own bleary eyes, topped off with a messy head of hair, and looked at his surroundings with a bewildered expression. "If I remember correctly, didn't I die in a car accident? Did I?" He looked at his hands in confusion and muttered to himself, "Did I transmigrate?" He lifted his head and observed the layout of the room. The design of the room is a luxurious palace decoration. There are some books, a dagger, and a mirror placed on the table. He noticed that the table, chairs, and other furniture in front of him seemed somewhat special. Palace-style decoration and furniture, Western style. He saw his current appearance in the mirror on the table. In the mirror, his long blonde hair was scattered, and he possessed the face of a beautiful boy who could charm thousands of girls. He touched his face and murmured to himself, "There's also this face that looks almost exactly the same as when I was 17 or 18 years old." He couldn't figure out where he was exactly. He grabbed his hair frantically with both hands, with a frightened expression on his face. Where did this transmigrate me to? Suddenly, he seemed to realize something. He got out of bed and walked to the desk. He propped up the seat with one hand and placed the other on his chin, repeatedly looking at himself in the mirror on the desk in front of him. "Take another look. Hey, I was really handsome when I was young. To be honest, the appearance is quite well restored. This should be a world like games." At this moment, he suddenly froze and his eyes became serious. "Wait!" He held his chin with one hand and looked up, carefully considering the current situation. Being transmigrated into an alien world because I was hit by a truck. Isn't this just a fantasy in my mind as a middle-aged homebody before I die? He stood in front of the table and picked up the red dagger on the table. He stared at the dagger while thinking about how to confirm his current situation. This needs to be confirmed. Only the sound of a knife cutting through the skin was heard, followed by a line of blood flying out. The sunlight from the window shone right through, illuminating the line of blood even more clearly. He just cut his finger with a knife. The blood and fingers instantly spurted out. He held a knife in one hand and looked expressionlessly at the blood flying out of his fingers. I merely made a shallow cut on my finger. This knife. It's too sharp. It hurts so much. It's true. I have truly transmigrated another world. After feeling the real pain, he covered his hands and rolled back and forth on the bed in pain, occasionally licking the blood that flew out with his mouth. Suddenly he felt his soul trembling. He who was rolling around instantly froze in place. It was as if something was pouring into his brain. In his memory, he was wearing tattered clothes and leaning against the wall, while the girl walking past in front of him was the protagonist of this world. A strange voice suddenly sounded. Moen Campbell blasphemed the royal family, stripped him of his noble status, and demoted him to commoners. His crime is unforgivable, and he is sentenced to exile. The scene changed, and he became a beggar on the street. He was disheveled and wearing his tattered clothes. He leaned helplessly against the dirty wall, surrounded by scattered bottles of wine and garbage. He even lost one hand and one leg, looking very down and out. Moen Campbell shall never enter the territory of the Empire. Violators will be killed without mercy. After these memories were played back in his mind, he felt his mind go groggy. There is too much information for him to accept all at once. He leaned against the bed, tilted his head back, and kept panting heavily. He covered his head with his hand and muttered to himself, "Huh. I can't believe it." At first, I thought the name was just a coincidence, but I didn't expect. After slowing down from the uncomfortable feeling, his expression became grave and his eyes looked straight ahead. He suddenly recalled the name and backstory of the original owner of this current body, and couldn't help but sigh. I actually reincarnate into this guy's body. That retarded, brain-dead dude. The yellow-haired villain who wasn't even an elite monster. The name of this person popped into his mind. That's right. He was reincarnated into this villain named Moen Campbell. Moen recalled his past life. He remembered the light novel he would stay up late every night, with heavy dark circles under his eyes, huddled in bed reading light novels on his mobile phone. The Strongest and Most Gifted Girl in History is the most popular light novel of the year in the world before I was reborn, and also one of the few works I read every day. The book roughly tells the story of the protagonist, who is the illegitimate daughter of a fallen aristocrat, upgrading and killing various enemies along the way, and rising to become a great hero who saves the world. The person sitting in the chair now, with a very provocative expression, is the villain of this novel, Moen Campbell. Moen Campbell is a brainless, yellow-haired villain in the early part of the book. He used his family power to oppress the protagonist, constantly sending people to murder the female lead and help the protagonist team upgrade. In the end, his plot shattered, and he even involved his own parents, ending up with a broken family. If I remember correctly, there is no plot about him in this book after more than 20 chapters. Moen recalled all the bad things he had done and his tragic ending, and couldn't help but feel deeply affected. He buried his head in his knees and covered his head with both hands. Such a person doesn't want to be a good young master, but has to be a fool who gets in the way of the protagonist. That's me. Moen felt especially helpless when he realized that he had been reborn as the villain that everyone in this world was crying out for. He held his head and had a look of wanting to cry on his face. I thought that I would be reborn once to become a protagonist and have a good time. As a result, I was reincarnated into this fool who was destined to become a stepping stone. What can I do? It's over now. While Moen was still in a state of anxiety over the fact that he was the villain, a knock suddenly came from outside the door. A maid knocked on the door of his room. Noticing that someone was about to enter the room, Moen hurriedly wiped the tears on his face with his sleeve so as not to let others notice his current appearance. After adjusting his emotions, he spoke towards the door. Come in. The door to the room was opened, and a very pretty maid came in with a small suitcase and a graceful step. She is the maid of Duke Campbell's mansion. Her name is Anne, and stood in front of Moen and greeted him first. Young master. When Anne first came in, Moen didn't think of her name for a moment. He stammered out the name of the person that happened to pop into his head. Oh, you're Anne. What's up? And held up the small box in his hand and showed it to him. Young master's formal attire for tomorrow's banquet has been delivered. Madam asks me to bring it to you for a try. Moen sat on the bed, scratching his head and awkwardly replying to Anne's words. He doesn't want others to know that the current Moen is no longer the same as before. Okay, I know. Put it over there. At this moment, Anne frowned slightly. She stared at Moen as if sensing something unusual about him. She leaned down slightly and noticed bloodstains on Moon's fingers. She asked him softly, "Young master, are you injured?" Moen lifted his hand and looked at it, only to find that his fingers were still bleeding. He smiled lightly and replied to Anne's question. "Yes, I accidentally broke my skin just now. It's okay. Do you have any medication to stop the bleeding or a band-aid?" Band-aid? Apparently, Anne didn't know what exactly was the band-aid that Moen was talking about. There didn't seem to be such a thing in this world. Anne knelt on one knee in front of Moen and pulled his injured hand, as if preparing to do something. Anne doesn't know what the young master is saying, but if it's just about stopping bleeding, I can still do it. Moen looked at her with some confusion. He thought Anne was going to use healing magic to stop his bleeding. Oh, Anne, you know how to treat. However, in the next moment, Anne held Moon's hand with both hands and gently licked his injured finger with his tongue. She made this gesture expressionlessly, as if she didn't find it strange. However, Moen may not be the same. After being licked by Anne like this, he felt very surprised. Moen can intuitively feel the touch of Anne's tongue. He froze on the spot, his face instantly turned red like an apple. He hadn't expected her method of stopping the bleeding to be in such a way. After licking it several times in a row, the bleeding had slightly stopped. Anne's mouth opened slightly, leaving Moon's fingers. His fingers were left with a small amount of her saliva. The bleeding has stopped. Every drop of the young master's blood is very precious. Please do not easily injure yourself. And gently wiped his mouth and offered a kind reminder to Moen. Her cheeks also blushed slightly, as if the previous action had made her a little excited. Moen had a reddened face and eyes wide open, still not having eased up from what he'd just been through. He stammered and replied to Anne, "Okay, I'll remember," and stood up, turned around, and prepared to leave Moon's room. She calmly said to Moen, "If young master has no other needs, I will go out to work first." Moen nodded stiffly. Thank you. Sorry to have worried you." When Anne left the room and heard her footsteps gradually fading away, Moen finally couldn't help it. The blush on his cheeks has not yet faded. He tightly held his hands and was about to lose control of his emotions. Suddenly, he held his face in both hands and felt very excited. "Oh my God, she is too cute." He excitedly rolled on the bed while recalling what Anne had done to him just now. He has never received such treatment before. Black-haired and gentle maid sister, just now she's so cute. While Moen was still excited about what had just happened in the room, and outside the door did not notice the sound in the room. As she walked, she was still thinking about how Moen had just made her feel a little off. This seems quite different from the usual Moen. Young master. She frowned slightly, doubting Moen and his behavior just now. Did he just say thank you to me? Moen, who was rolling back and forth on the bed, felt a little tired at this moment. He lay flat on the bed, staring at the ceiling, recalling the plot of his story in this novel. He didn't understand why Moen Campbell, whose family background was so good, still had to provoke the protagonist. The son of a duke, with high status, handsome appearance, a family that is not short of money, and a maid sister to take care of him. Why does he have to provoke the protagonist? If I remember the plot correctly, it seems that the Duke's mansion was raided because he drugged the princess during his coming-of-age ceremony. It was as if Moen had thought of a way to avoid going towards the destruction of his family. He sat up from the bed with a confident smile on his face. Since I know the problem, it's easy to handle. As long as I try not to provoke that protagonist, and don't do anything stupid at the coming-of-age ceremony. I, Moen, still have a chance to change my destiny against all odds. Moen held his chin with one hand, pondering how he should continue to live in this world in the future. In order to still be a wealthy playboy in the future, I need to plan carefully and carefully. Speaking of which, when was the coming-of-age ceremony? Suddenly, he remembered that Anne had just brought his coming-of-age gown to his room, and seemed to have mentioned the time of the coming-of-age ceremony. Anne just gave me the formal dress for the coming-of-age ceremony. Tomorrow. Tomorrow? Knowing that the coming-of-age ceremony would be held tomorrow, Moen was completely stunned. He didn't expect to face his own ending so soon. He couldn't help but howl loudly in his room. Damn it! He crumbled onto his bed, hugging his thighs and weeping silently. System, are you there? The old man? Goddess? Cupid? Moen shouted out these names one by one, trying to be able to summon someone to help him with the difficulty at hand. However, unfortunately, no one appeared in front of him out of thin air. He cried in despair while muttering to himself, "Anyone? Can anyone hear me?" Does Elle really not have any cheat abilities? It's not like Elle only got a 10 pull with 5 golds in my last life. Even if it was a lucky draw, it should not be like this. Right? Knowing that the course of events had been irrevocably changed, Moen sighed in resignation. Tomorrow is the coming-of-age ceremony. It's already too late. I don't know if apologizing to the protagonist in person tomorrow can solve the problem. She probably wouldn't make any excessive demands, such as publicly licking her feet to forgive her. In Moon's fantasy, he was fiercely stepped on by a long leg, wearing black stockings, and was unable to move. Moon, you can do it. A true man is born to face the world, able to endure pain and overcome difficulties. An insult like licking feet is nothing compared to having my family broken up. I just need to bear this humiliation alone. Of course, it would be even better if she could wear black stockings tomorrow. Moon, who had decided on a solution, clapped his hands, smiled, and comforted himself. It's decided. As soon as I meet with the protagonist tomorrow, I'll rush up and slide on my knees at light speed and kowtow 3 more times. At this time, what Moon didn't know was that a mysterious portal quietly appeared from behind him. Immediately afterwards, something seemed to fall from the portal and hit his head. He shouted in pain. He covered his head while angrily turning back, wanting to see what hit him. What exactly is it? It hurts so much. Is this going to smash my head through? He fixed his eyes on his bed, and a book with a purple cover suddenly appeared out of nowhere. There was also a strange pattern on the cover of the book. This is... Moon walked towards the bed and reached out a trembling hand to pick up the book. Could it be? Could it be? He was elated, feeling like it was what he had hoped would come to him. My cheat ability has arrived. A mysterious book that fell from the sky made me think there was still a chance to change my fate. But the book made me dizzy, and then I found myself in an unknown place. The mysterious woman, who suddenly appeared, flew several silver knives towards me, which scared me and immediately woke me up. Who exactly is she? Was it just a dream that foresaw my ending? In order to prevent myself from heading towards a bad ending, I have decided to start looking for ways to avoid it and strive to survive in this world. Moon trembled as he picked up the purple book from the bed. He carefully held it with both hands, as if he had obtained a treasure. Ah, it seems. He clung to the book as if he had grabbed a lifesaver. He cried tears of joy while hugging the book, thinking that this was something brought to him by God that could change his fate. God still hasn't given up on me. Although I'm a loser boy destined to be cannon fodder, having cheat ability is different. Before the blood on his head could be wiped off, Moon was already sitting on the bed, flipping open the book with excitement. He couldn't wait to see what methods were recorded inside that could change his destiny. He confidently said to himself, "From now on, I will change the original ending and change my destiny against all odds. As the saying goes, my fate is up to me." After turning the book over to one of the pages, Moon was suddenly dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the book, staring his eyes wide open, then blinked again, as if he couldn't believe that he had misread it. He thought his reading direction was not quite right, so he changed the direction of the book and read it again. However, he still found it very strange. He flipped the book back a few pages, wanting to take a look at the rest of the content. As it turned out, the content after the book was no different from what he had just seen. Moen found that there was actually no content in this book at all. This is a blank book. Moen looked at this book without any words and was very surprised. Wait, what is it? Is this a book without words? Does that mean I need to activate it in some special way? While placing the fingers of one hand on the bridge of his nose, Moen thought hard about what method the book needed to use to display the words. According to this Western European world setting, coincidentally, his fingers touched the blood flowing down from his head. Moen did not notice the direction of his blood flow. His fingers moved gently, and some blood flowed down his cheeks towards his chin. A few drops of blood dripped from his chin. Blood dripped onto one page of the book placed on Moon's leg. The pages quickly sucked the blood into the book, and then suddenly emitted black-purple energy from the book. At this moment, Moen realized that something was wrong. He lowered his head and looked at the book, noticing that it emitted a strange light, and the black-purple energy emanating from it surrounded him. The book suddenly floated out of his hand and flipped frantically in front of him. The sound of flipping through books echoed throughout the room, making him increasingly feel that something was wrong. During the process of flipping pages, a black-purple vortex gradually formed in the center of the book, followed by a huge suction force attempting to suck Moen into the book. Moen had no idea what happened. He looked at the strange book in front of him in surprise and cursed loudly. "Damn it! What's going on?" The book frantically flipped through pages while absorbing the blood that had flowed down Moon's head. "My blood." He crossed his hands in front of him to block it, and tried to lean back to prevent himself from being sucked in. However, the suction force is too strong, and Moon's hair is about to be sucked in. He looked at the current uncontrollable situation and felt somewhat helpless. Soon, due to the large amount of blood absorbed by the book, Moen felt unusually weak. His eyes were almost closed, and the scene in front of him gradually blurred. He could only see his own blood flying past his eyes and dripping into the book. After a while, he closed his eyes and lost consciousness. Unsure of what had happened, Moen seemed to have been transported by the book to an unknown place. His hands were secured to a wooden board, and there were many bruises and cuts on his hands. His feet were also fixed on the wooden board, covered in many bruises and scars. Take another look at the front of Moen. He was stripped of all his clothes and had a collar and chain around his neck. Not only the face, but even the body was covered with many red wounds. These terrible scars and bruises are so numerous that he seems to have been abused. His body was trembling, apparently due to a physical reaction caused by excessive pain. Moen woke up from a coma. He slowly opened his eyes. He looked around in a daze and realized he was in a place he didn't know. It was pitch black around him, and he couldn't see anything clearly. Where is this? Suddenly, the voice of an unfamiliar woman sounded somewhere. Oh! This mysterious woman appeared from nowhere and suddenly approached Moen. She looked at him with a very frightening expression on her face. She opened her red eyes wide, as if trying to reflect everything about Moen in her eyes. You finally woke up. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Moen was startled by her sudden appearance. He looked in surprise at the unfamiliar woman in front of him, who couldn't see her exact appearance. "Who are you?" Then, Moen realized that his entire body was bound by chains, and he couldn't move. He tried to break free of these chains, but found that whenever he moved, he pulled at the wounds on his body. He was in so much pain that his whole body was trembling. "Ah, it hurts so much." The strange woman stood next to him, with no intention of trying to free him from the chains. She said to him in a relaxed tone, "Pain is inevitable. It's all to make you remember." She extended a finger and gently brushed it across Moon's abdomen, then across Moon's chest. This made him feel very uncomfortable. Her fingers touched the scars on his body, causing him to tremble in pain. "You don't know how heartbroken I am at this moment. You shouldn't be like this. How evil, how cruel, and how selfish you are." Moen wanted to refute her, but had to give up because the wound was aching faintly. He could only close his eyes, bite his teeth, and try to endure. You should bring pain to others instead of tolerance, and make everyone hate you. Only then can you belong to me alone. But you have changed. You have changed your heart. Changing your heart is not acceptable." She propped her hand on her cheek. Her red eyes looked like they were radiating a ghastly red light. She stared at Moen with eyes like she was staring at prey. With a voice that was completely different from the one she had just used, she said the most possessive words to him. "But don't worry. No matter how much time it takes, I will purify you thoroughly with my love over and over again." She held several silver knives, and her eyes curved upwards. "We will be together forever. Even death cannot separate us." She flew all the silver knives in her hand towards him, who was fixed on the wooden board. Moen felt fearful of her behavior. He opened his eyes wide, looking at the silver knives that were about to stab him with a frightened expression, and couldn't help but shout out loudly, "No, no, no!" Startled, Moen suddenly opened his eyes and immediately struggled to sit up from the bed. He observed the surrounding environment and found himself still in his room. He was panting heavily, with sweat all over his face. He still felt a bit dazed and hadn't recovered from his tense state just now. Who? That was just... Moen slowly calmed down. He covered his head, unable to believe that everything he had just experienced was just a simple dream. A dream? He lowered his head and looked at his hands, only to find that they were still trembling involuntarily, and he could vaguely feel the pain in his body. The scene just now seemed to be real. The pain still lingers on the skin. The dream had been too real. He picked up the purple book beside him, carefully observing it while recalling what had just happened. Before I fainted, I remember this strange book flipping through pages frantically and sucking away a lot of my blood. If it is really the precognitive dream brought by this book, was the tragic ending caused by something I did wrong? He opened the book, trying to find clues about what had just happened. As soon as he opened the book, he suddenly froze. The Book of Prophecy emits black-purple energy outward. The page that didn't have any content written earlier suddenly displays a few lines of red text. However, some of these lines of words were so blurred that it was impossible to see the prototypes of the words clearly, and only a few words were visible. The words that can be read clearly are do not, change, for, and fate. Before Moen could figure out what the other words on the page were writing, the book of prophecy turned into a black light and entered his forehead. However, without having to read the remaining words clearly, Moen could roughly infer the meaning that these few lines wanted to convey to him. He touched his forehead, furrowed his brow gently, feeling somewhat distressed about his current situation. Is this a warning to me not to change the original plot? Otherwise, I will have that kind of ending. But why? Wouldn't that end badly? At this moment, it was already dusk, and the sun was about to set. The sunlight of the setting sun shone into his room, and the gentle breeze outside the window blew the curtains gently. Moen walked to the window, and a gentle breeze blew his hair. He looked out the window at the sunset and muttered to himself. So in the end, all my ideas were just wishful thinking. In order to survive, I can only choose to actively move towards destruction. He leaned his chin with one hand and fell into thought. Suddenly, he came up with a good idea based on the ending of Moen Campbell in the novel. Wait a minute. Actually thinking about it, the ending of him in the original book doesn't seem so bad. At least he was still alive in the end. That useless young master lacks the ability to make a living, and can only become a beggar after being exiled. But I am different. Having figured out the differences between him and the original Moen Campbell, Moen gained courage once again. He confidently lowered his head and watched as he clenched his fists, as if he had regained the drive to move forward. I am a battle-hardened working professional, forged through the relentless trials of the modern 996 and 007 work culture. Anyway, the subsequent plot of the novel doesn't mention what happened to Moen Campbell in the end. In that case, after being exiled, I can start from scratch in another country with the wisdom of modern people. The setting sun outside the window reflected on his body. He stood in front of the window, facing the fiery red sunset, and revealed a confident smile. The so-called aristocratic status was nothing to hold on to at all. It was nothing more than a privileged class obtained by squeezing the working people. As a genuine socialist proletarian warrior, I can still make a living in this world with my hands and knowledge. After a while, it was time for dinner. Moen changed his clothes and walked towards the dining room to eat. He gulped down the steak in front of him. He took a sip of the glass of wine held in his left hand and ate a piece of steak from the fork in his right hand. He enjoyed these delicious foods that he had never been able to eat in his past life, and temporarily put aside what he had just said in the room. Damn it, I've never tasted such delicious steak and this wine in my previous life. This wicked privileged class is so delicious. There are not only steaks and wine on the dining table, but also other delicious dishes and desserts. In his past life, he had never been able to eat so well. Moen ate these delicious foods and felt like he was in heaven. He covered his cheeks, enjoying these delicacies with a look of intoxication. The elegant and mature woman sitting next to Moen is the Princess of Campbell Noyce Campbell, who is Moen's mother. She noticed that her son's mood today was a bit different from before, so she put down the knife and fork in her hand and asked him with a smile, "What's going on here? Moen seems very happy today." Haha, he must be looking forward to tomorrow's coming-of-age banquet. After all, that was one of the most important banquets in Moen's life. the slightly dignified man sitting on the other side of the princess. He is the Grand Duke of Campbell, Ron Campbell. He also known as Moon's father. He inserted a stake and looked at his son beside him with a smile, answering the princess's question. Upon hearing her parents mention the topic of coming-of-age ceremony, Moon elegantly put down the utensils in her hand and replied to them with a relaxed tone. "Yes, father, mother, I am looking forward to it." The princess held her face in both hands and looked happily at her beloved son. "Tomorrow, my son will definitely be the most eye-catching presence at the banquet. I don't know how many noble girls he will charm." The Grand Duke looked at the princess with indulgent eyes and replied with a smile. "Haha, that's unacceptable. Moon in our family has a betrothed wife. If Princess Cecilia sees and becomes jealous, it will be difficult to explain." As soon as the Grand Duke mentioned the name Cecilia, the princess became somewhat unhappy. She hugged her arms with both hands, pouted, and turned her head to one side. I don't like Princess Cecilia. She is cold and not cute at all. She is simply not worthy of our little Moon." The Grand Duke comforted her and explained to her. "You can't say that. If even Princess Cecilia is not worthy of him, then no one is worthy." Moon supported his chin with both hands and smiled as he watched the interesting interaction between his parents. However, he was quietly commenting on what they said in his mind at this point. "My dear parents, how confident are you in your son? What kind of person is Princess Cecilia?" That is the third princess of the Empire, the pure white girl who has received God's gift, and a powerful candidate for the Empire's first beauty. In the novel, she gained a large following with her aloof temperament, and the contrast between being cold on the outside and hot on the inside. Wherever she goes, she is a highly anticipated presence. In the novel, Cecilia, dressed in glamorous attire, holds a wand and looks firmly into the distance. The temperament she exudes makes people feel that she is a graceful princess. Moon looked at his parents, who knew nothing, and shook his head gently. He was a bit speechless about his parents' current behavior. He recalled the bad things done by Moon Campbell in the novel and his bad character, and knew that he was not worthy of Cecilia at all. What kind of person is your son? Don't you realize it yourself? Only you will consider him a treasure in this world. The Grand Duke and the princess were chatting happily under the sunset, and occasional bursts of joyful laughter could be heard. Moon watched them while expressing his thoughts in his heart. In the original work, both of you were good people, but unfortunately, you had such a son. According to the original plot, you will also be implicated in the coming-of-age ceremony event. After that, the entire Campbell family was forced to fade out of the core circle of the upper echelons of the Empire and completely disappear from the story. He slightly bowed to his parents, indicating that he had finished his meal and left the restaurant first. Even though that book says that you can't go against your destiny, the fate of broken arm and leg, exiled and reduced to an invalid, is an opening that would be too difficult to turn around even with a modern mindset. I can't accept it. Moon walked towards the door with a determined stride. I have to think of a way to do something. I can't change my own destiny, but it doesn't mean I can't change someone else's. He tightened his tie and looked solemnly ahead, his expression as if he was about to make a major decision. Upon careful consideration, looking at the entire incident, taking action against the princess was not the real reason for my punishment and exile. because I was convicted of treason and implicated my father. The Duke of Campbell, who held military power, fell into a power struggle and was purged by the imperial ruling class and the aristocratic class. This is it. So, on the premise that the outcome remains unchanged, I need to pull the Campbell family out of the entire incident as a life-saving talisman after exile. Additionally, I need to find someone to take responsibility. Speaking of taking the blame, there seems to be no more suitable place in this Western fantasy background world. In order to avoid a bad ending, I started planning to change the conditions that trigger the ending. I found the black card hidden in the treasure chest, and planned to enter the underground black market to find the medicine that can bewitch the princess. Based on my memory, I found a small shop selling this medicine. After I explained the situation, the shop owner turned around and searched among a pile of bottles. Can the shop owner find what I'm looking for? The sun outside the castle has slowly set. The clouds slowly disappeared into the sky. The orange sunset shines on every corner of the castle. A gust of wind blew gently, making the leaves on the tree rustle. After dinner, Moen walked down the corridor of the Grand Duke's mansion. He is preparing to return to his room. As he walked, he pondered on how to change the triggering ending for the outcome next. There is only one day left before the coming-of-age ceremony, and it is too late to make any more arrangements now. But we can only take one step at a time and improvise. The first order of business is still to solve the established end of offending the royal family. Pure white girl, future imperial Queen Cecilia. It is obviously impossible to defeat that once-in-a-millennium magical genius with ordinary drugs. And this guy has never had any related drugs in his memory, which proves that there is currently no such thing in the mansion. Perhaps there is one there. He closed his eyes and held his chin with his right hand, lost in thought. Suddenly, he thought of a place where he could buy the medicine he had in mind. Hey, I remember when I inherited my memory, there was a place called the Black Market that specialized in selling various prohibited items and slaves. Maybe. At this moment, around the corner, a maid walked over holding a teapot and teacup filled with black tea. Her face is red, and she looks not very energetic. Moen, who was thinking about something, didn't notice that someone was about to come over. The maid didn't notice who was about to walk over. In the next second, Moen and the maid collided together. Both of them let out a pained yelp at the same time. After being hit by Moen, the maid immediately fell to the ground. The teapot and teacup in her hand spilled on the ground, and all the tea in the teapot was spilled out. Some of the tea even got stuck on her long socks. Due to the impact just now, her head felt even more dizzy. She rubbed her head with her hand, looked at the spilled red tea, and nervously said, So painful. The master and madam's black tea. Sorry, I was just thinking about something and didn't see the way. Are you okay? Moen, who had already stood up, saw that the maid who had been bumped into was still sitting on the ground, so he reached out his hand and tried to pull her up. The maid raised her head, and after seeing the person standing in front of her clearly, the expression on her face suddenly turned to fear. She backed away in fear and stammered. You are young Master Moen. The maid recognized the person in front of her as the young master of Duke Campbell. She exclaimed in panic. Seeing the tea splashing onto Moen's collar, she became even more nervous. Moen raised an eyebrow and didn't seem too concerned about the maid bumping into him. The maid hurriedly took out a handkerchief to wipe his collar, wanting to remove the stains. She nervously said to him, "Young master, I'm sorry. I'll help you now." Moen looked down in confusion and realized that his collar was a bit dirty. He raised his hands, intending to give the maid some space to easily wipe his collar. He was surprised by the maid's nervous mood. However, the white collar was getting dirtier as she wiped it, and the traces of tea were getting bigger and bigger. Seeing the dirty collar unable to be wiped clean, the maid panicked. She cried nervously, "It's ruined." She turned her back to Moen, quickly hugged her head with both hands, and crouched down. She felt like she had committed a heinous act. "Young master, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to. Please don't hit me, don't strip me naked, and throw me on the street. I will definitely not do it again next time. Ah, young master, spare my life." She was so scared that tears couldn't stop flowing, and her face turned red from being too nervous. Moen stood behind her and didn't say a word. From the maid's words, Moen roughly inferred the original Moen Campbell's attitude towards the household servants. He looked at the trembling maid, sighed, and looked speechless, not knowing where to say the original Moen Campbell. Just spilled a cup of tea, scared the little girl like this. How bad is the impression of the original Moen Campbell in the eyes of others? Moen leaned slightly down and reached out to support the maid's arm, wanting to help her up. He said softly to her, with a gentle expression, "Okay, it's just a small issue. I won't punish you. Get up." The maid turned her head slightly and found that Moen not only did not punish her, but also took the initiative to pull her up. She looked at him with teary eyes, somewhat puzzled. At this moment, Moen, who touched the maid's arm, felt that her body temperature was slightly higher than that of ordinary people. He asked her with a caring tone, "Speaking of which, are you okay? Your body is so hot." Then, the maid felt a pulling force pulling her over. She opened her eyes wide. Moen held the back of the maid's head and pulled her into his arms. He pressed his neck against the maid's forehead, testing her temperature, and found that it was indeed very high. "Sure enough, your body is so hot. Don't you even know that you have a fever? Your forehead is so hot that you can cook eggs. Why don't you go rest? Young master." The maid raised her head and looked at him nervously. She didn't know why Moen did this to her. She was flushed and couldn't tell if she was now blushing, because of the fever or because of Moen's behavior. Because tomorrow is the young master's coming-of-age banquet, and there is currently a shortage of manpower in the household. So, Moen's voice sounded above her head. "Even so, you can't work while sick." Just as he released the maid in his arms, Anne walked over from the other end of the corridor. She saw Moen standing with a maid and expressed confusion about it. "Young master?" Moen and the maid turned their heads together and noticed Anne walking towards them. "Ah, Anne, you came just in time. Arrange for her." He suddenly remembered that he hadn't asked the name of the maid in front of him yet. He supported her shoulder and asked her with a smile on his face, "By the way, what's your name?" The maid looked up blankly at Moen and whispered her name. "Young master. My name is Noel." Moen gently patted her shoulder and said to Anne standing behind her, Arrange for Noel to rest." regarding the arrangement mentioned by Moen, and explained the current situation expressionlessly. "But young master, tomorrow night is your coming-of-age ceremony, and now every maid in the mansion has her own responsibilities. If Noel takes a break, the workload of other maids will increase significantly." Without hesitation, Moen immediately gave an answer. "Recruit people from outside. Our Grand Ducal mansion cannot afford to hire even a few people." Moen turned around and prepared to return to his room. He looked at Anne with a firm gaze. He said softly to her, "That's how it was decided. Tell the head maid to arrange for all unwell servants to rest, and for vacant staff to be recruited from outside. I don't want a large group of mentally confused patients to cause inconvenience to the guests at tomorrow's coming-of-age ceremony." And closed his eyes and bowed slightly, indicating that he had received instructions from Moen. "I understand. I will convey this command to the head maid." After Moen finished explaining the maid's affairs, he left here directly and walked back to his room. Anne and Noel stood behind him, watching him leave until his figure disappeared around the corner, and the sound of footsteps gradually faded away. Noel looked at Moen's back, feeling a little confused about his behavior and what had just happened. She asked Anne, who was standing next to her. "Anne, I remember the young master said before that he didn't want dirty outsiders to dirty the Duke's mansion, so he didn't let the maid master recruit foreign aid? Today's young master," and seems to know what she wants to ask. She didn't give a direct answer, but asked her to go rest quickly. "Don't overthink. Follow the young master's orders and go rest quickly." Although Noel was still confused about the current situation, Anne said so, and had no choice but to comply. "Okay." Noel turned around and took a step back to his room to rest. However, Anne remained standing still, seemingly pondering something. She turned around with a meaningful expression and looked towards a certain part of the hallway. Compared to before, there have indeed been some subtle changes. In order to avoid uncontrollable situations, it seems that the plan must be brought forward. After returning to the room, Moen searched for something in the room. He threw out some jewelry, and then threw the scroll he found on the ground. These don't seem to be what he's looking for. There is a large treasure chest placed somewhere in the room. Moen knelt on the ground and crawled into the treasure chest to search for things. Various types of jewelry are scattered around the treasure chest. He searched and threw out a batch of unnecessary jewelry while muttering to himself. "This is not, and neither is this. It's impossible. This guy's memory." The only way to deal with a super magical genius like a princess is to use special psychedelic potions. This thing is not only difficult to refine, expensive, but also a prohibited item. The only place where it can be sold is... "I found it. This guy is really a scumbag. In the novel, I remember it was quite difficult to get this thing." After searching for a while, Moen finally found a black card in the treasure chest. He crawled out of the treasure chest and also dropped some jewelry. He had several strings of precious jewelry hanging on his head and shoulders, some of which even fell to the ground. However, Moen didn't care about those. When he found the card, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. The black card in Moen's hand is also decorated with gold borders. Although it may seem ordinary, this card is very useful. This is a proof of access to the underground black market. A VIP pass for the underground black market. That evening, Moen rode in a luxurious carriage through several brightly lit streets, and then crossed a bridge, preparing to enter the city gate. Probably because it was nighttime. The people on the bridge and near the city gates were a bit sparse. In no time, the carriage stopped in front of a very luxurious and magnificent building. This building is called the Chasford Chamber of Commerce. Moen got off the carriage, and the guards protecting him followed closely behind. He instructed them, "Wait for me here for a while. I'll go buy some gold and silver jewelry for my father and mother to wear tomorrow." The groom and 2 guards nodded and answered, "Okay, young master." Moen detoured behind the carriage and then cautiously turned around to take a look. After observing for a moment and realizing that no one was nearby to notice him, he tightened his tie and turned towards a path diametrically opposed to the Chamber of Commerce. People come and go on the streets. Some people were walking and chatting, while others were hurriedly searching for their desired destination. They didn't notice that a person with yellow hair quietly left the street and quickly walked into a small path next to a house. After entering the small path, Moen entered the sewer below the city of the Empire. The water in the sewer flowed slowly, occasionally emitting a foul odor. He pulled out a black cloak from somewhere and put it on his body. He walked while searching for a route to enter the underground black market. According to the route in memory, the outer ring of the royal city, deep in the sewer of Belland City. He wears a mask and covers his head with the hat on his cloak to conceal his true appearance and identity. He held a torch and slowly searched along the route in his memory. In no time, he found a door guarded by someone. He held up the torch and shone it around, confirming that this should be the entrance to the black market. This should be the place. The person guarding the gate is also wearing a black cloak and a mask on their face. It seems that people here have a very high sense of confidentiality. He could see someone walking towards here from a distance, very cautiously questioning the other party. "Stop. Who are you?" Moen answered the man's question in front of him according to the secret language he had memorized. "The mice in the sewer." "What are you doing here?" Moen took out the black card from his clothes. He walked forward and showed it to the guards, indicating that he was a customer of the black market. "Search for carrion. This is my pass." The guard leaned in to observe the black card. After determining that it was a pass exclusive to the black market, he gave way and bowed slightly. "Honored guest, please come in." The guard turned around and opened the door. Some light shone out from behind the door. Moen's eyes widened slightly, a little excited and curious about what the black market looked like. What Moen didn't expect was that there could still be such a large black market in the space of the sewer. The black market is shrouded in a dark atmosphere. Except for the shops where the lights are on, there is not much light in the entire black market. This is the underground black market of the Empire, the Leopold Underground Black Market. As Moen walked, he observed the various mysterious things placed outside by the shop owners. He saw many bottles containing magical herbs on the shelves of a shop. These bottles come in various sizes and contain medicinal herbs of different shapes. Magical herbs material. He looked at another shop again. There are many iron cages next to the shop, which contain several fierce-looking animals. Magic synthesis beast. Moen was surprised by the things sold on the black market, while muttering to himself. This truly embodies a fantastical world. If I recall correctly, this place even deals in the trade of demi-human slaves. It seems that one of the protagonist's later teammates bought it from here. Well, these are all secondary. Let's focus on the main task at hand. Moen found a small shop based on the address in his memory. He pushed the door open, and the bell on the wall made a pleasant sound, reminding the shop owner that a customer had come in. Upon hearing the sound of the bell, the shop owner immediately stood up from his seat. The shop owner is wearing a red cloak with cat ears and a mask with a cat-like mouth, making him look like a red kitten. She waved her hand and warmly welcomed the arrival of the guests. Wow! Finally a guest came to our door today. Please come in. After welcoming the guests, the shop owner sat down with her hands on her face and looked towards Moen. What does this young master want to see? Although the store is small, it doesn't lack anything. Moen won't beat around the bush either. He directly told the shop owner what he wanted. I want that kind of medicine. The shop owner had some doubts. That kind? It's the kind that is colorless and odorless, specifically designed for wizards, and immediately leaves them unconscious for several hours after taking it. The shop owner thought for a moment and then gestured okay to Moen, as if she immediately knew what medicine he was looking for. Oh, it's that kind. I understand. Wealthy people all like to play like this, right? Haha. Then, the shop owner placed an advertisement for Moen. I happen to know several good shops that sell slaves. Can I recommend them to you? Just need to pay some referral fees. Reporting my name can also offer discounts. Seeing that the shop owner had been talking here for so long without intending to find what he wanted, Moen turned around and wanted to leave the store. Don't you have it here? If not, I'll leave. The shop owner found that his promotion had caused his impatience, so she quickly reached out her hand to persuade him. There is. Of course there is. Young master, please stay. This small shop has several rows of cabinets, on which there are also many unknown jars containing magical herbs. The shop owner hurriedly got up and walked towards the cabinet at the back, pointing to it and saying to Moen, "But this treasure is a scarce item. I need to look for it. Young master, please wait for me for a moment." The shopkeeper opened some bottles and jars on the cabinet, searching for the medicine that Moen wanted. Moen stood still, watching the busy movements of the shop owner, silently analyzing in his heart. This person has camouflage magic on their face, and voice has been processed by magic, making it difficult to distinguish whether male or female. However, the tone and demeanor. And this amazing figure. The shop owner searched for a while, but still couldn't find the bottle that stored that medicine. Oh no, the 2 bottles of medicine that were refined 2 days ago. I remember they were placed in this box. Where did they go? Through these, Moen roughly determined the gender of the shop owner. Female, most likely still a beautiful girl. To secure a foothold in such a murky and cutthroat environment, the shop owner's skills are probably more powerful than her figure. If I could establish a good relationship with such a person, she might be able to help me when I am exiled by the Empire in the future. Just as the shop owner was searching for the magic potion I was looking for, another mysterious customer entered the store. She also wants to buy the same magic potion as me. When I was about to pay for the potion, The mysterious customer exchanged one of the bottles with a piece of information. I was curious about the customer's information, but the expensive price proposed by the shop owner was unacceptable to me. Finally, the day of the coming-of-age ceremony arrived. Cecilia, the third princess of the empire, also arrived at the Duke's residence. Since the shopkeeper couldn't immediately remember where the potion Moen had requested was stored, and there were so many different types of potions on the shelf, she searched for a while but couldn't find it. She was worried that Moen would become impatient if he waited too long, so she turned around and informed him in advance. "Wait for me a moment, young master." Fortunately, Moen is a patient person. As long as this store has the potion he wants, he doesn't mind waiting for a long time. "It's okay, as long as you have it. I'm not in a hurry." Just as the shop owner turned around to continue searching for the magic potion, the small bell outside the shop rang again. Another customer pushed open the door and came into this store to buy something. Moen heard the sound of the bell and curiously looked towards the direction of the door. Immediately after, the mysterious customer stood next to Moen. This customer's entire body is covered by a black robe, and she is wearing the hat that comes with the black robe on her head. Wearing a black mask on her face, leaving only a pair of red eyes. Wearing black stockings on both legs and boots on the feet. The shop owner, who was looking for something, also heard the sound of a bell, turned around and waved her hand, warmly welcoming the customer. "Oh, welcome." Before the shop owner could finish speaking, the customer directly told her the item she wanted to purchase. "I want to buy a medicine that has strong potency and won't leave any traces of magic. Do you have one here?" The shop owner didn't expect this customer to buy the same magic potion as the previous one. She awkwardly scratched her face and answered the customer's question. I have it here. Wait a moment." The shop owner felt strange about this. It seems that not many people usually come to her to buy this type of potion, but today, there happened to be two people who wanted to buy the same potion. She silently said in her heart, "This type of potion usually goes unnoticed. It's really strange today." Moen secretly observed this mysterious customer nearby. Based on the customer's figure, attire, and the body odor emanating from them, he speculated that the customer was a female. However, he is not quite sure why women also come to buy this type of medicine. This figure, as well as the faint fragrance emanating from it. Do women also have this need? The mysterious woman wearing a black robe quietly lowered her head, without saying a word, waiting for the shop owner to find what she was looking for. She didn't seem to notice Moen's gaze for the time being. Although Moen doesn't know the reason why she bought this medicine, she probably has similar thoughts to him. He silently speculated in his heart. Well, most people who buy this medicine are likely to harm someone. Unfortunately, I couldn't stop it. The guy who was drugged, good luck to you. The shop owner carefully searched every floor of the cabinet and finally found the type of potion they were looking for in the corner of one floor. She placed 2 bottles on the table and showed them. "I found it. That's it. The magic potion is a dark red liquid. It is contained in a heart-shaped bottle, and the outer body of the bottle is decorated with gold-colored metal roses." Seeing the color of the potion, Moen was a bit stunned. "Wait a moment. Isn't this color a bit too conspicuous?" The shop owner seemed to know that Moen had doubts about this bottle of medicine. So he picked up one of the bottles and introduced some details to him and another customer. Customers don't need to worry, although the color of this medicine is indeed a bit bright. As long as it is placed in drinks such as red wine, it will not be noticed at all. And compared to the small flaw that is a bit eye-catching, its advantages are much greater. As long as a person drinks a small drop, even an elephant will instantly lose consciousness and faint for 2 to 3 hours. Moen was very surprised by the effect of this bottle of potion. He has never seen a potion that can even stun animals. He said in great shock, "A drop of potion can knock out an elephant. Really?" The shop owner didn't find his reaction strange. She kindly explained to him, "Of course it's true. You get what you pay for. If you don't believe it, you can give it a try. I declare in advance that if you fall asleep here, you will be charged 5,000 Amir's sleep fee per hour." Moen smiled awkwardly. He doesn't want to bear such a strange expense. He waved his hand in refusal. That's not necessary." The mysterious customer picked up one of the bottles of magic potion. She didn't speak to them, just quietly turned the bottle in her hand, observed it thoroughly and carefully, and then placed it on the table. The shop owner spread out his hand and told Moen and the mysterious customer the price of this potion. Specially made sleeping potion, priced at 130,000 Amir, no price negotiation allowed. Would you two like to pay by crystal card or cash? Moen reached into his black cloak and prepared to take out his card to make the payment. He planned to pay by card. Swipe. Just as he was searching for his card, the mysterious customer standing in front of him spoke to the shop owner first. She calmly said to the shop owner, "I don't have enough Amir, and I don't plan to use Amir to pay the bill." She also reached into her black robe, as if searching for something. Judging from her actions, it seems like she has no intention of buying the potion without paying. Then she continued to talk to the shop owner. "I can sell you an information as an exchange for a potion." Although the shop owner's expression was invisible, she seemed very interested in the information that the customer was saying. However, is just one piece of information enough to be worth 130,000 Amir? She touched her face, thought for a moment, and replied to the customer with a playful tone. "Oh, I have to remind you, 130,000 is not a small amount." The customer took out a sealed envelope and handed it to the shop owner. She was very sure of the value of this piece of information. She confidently told the shop owner, "This information is definitely worth 130,000 Amir. Even for different people, its value is far more than 130,000 Amir." The shop owner took the envelope and took out the letter containing the information to read. "Okay, let me see what kind of information it is." She quickly browsed through the information on the paper, seeming a little skeptical of the content. She brought the letter closer and read it carefully again. Based on the content on the letter, she seemed to infer what might happen next. She said to the customer with a slightly surprised tone, "Well, it's interesting. Are you sure this information is true?" The mysterious customer did not directly state the authenticity of the information. Whether it is true or not, based on your abilities as the shop owner, you can easily find out. The shopkeeper put down the letter and acknowledged the customer's understanding of her abilities with approval. "Oh, this guest really trusts me. However, as you said, This information is indeed worth 130,000. She pushed a bottle of magic potion over to her. Take it. This bottle of magic potion is yours now. Thank you. The mysterious customer left a thank you and didn't say much more. She took a bottle of magic potion directly and stuffed it into her black robe, leaving the shop without looking back. The shop owner waved her hand and watched her leave. Take care and see you next time. Standing beside, Moen watched the entire transaction between the shop owner and the customer. He didn't say a word throughout the entire process and had doubts about such a transaction. The shop owner turned his head and looked at Moen, who was still standing there, asking about his payment method. Young master, how about you? Moen still watched in the direction where the customer left. He handed the black crystal card to the shop owner and answered her absent-mindedly. I swipe my card. The shop owner picked up the crystal card with both hands and answered cheerfully. Okay. After the payment is completed, the owner will return the crystal card to Moen. At this moment, she took out another bottle of white potion from the cabinet and placed it next to the red potion. Young master, please keep the crystal card. This white bottle is a small gift for you. Moen expressed doubts about the use of this small magic potion. A small gift? What is this potion for? The shop owner extended one hand, raised one finger and shook it, while the other hand crossed his waist, and said to him in a playful tone, You know, it's for that one. I suggest using it together with the red bottle for better results. Although he didn't know what the actual effect would be if the two bottles were used together, Moen didn't think too much and accepted her kindness. He put both bottles of magic potion into his cloak and thanked her. At this moment, he remembered the customer who had just exchanged intelligence for the potion, and was very curious about what kind of information could have such high value. Thank you, shop owner. By the way, the information that the woman just said. Noticing that Moen was also interested in the information just now, the shop owner quickly sat down. Her body moved slightly forward, her hands supporting her face, and her eyes shining brightly as she looked at him. Moen was startled by her sudden movement, and instinctively took a step back. She excitedly said to him, Oh, is the young master also interested in this information? Since we're old acquaintances, I'll sell it to you at this price. The shop owner reached out and made a 9 gesture. Moen knows that the prices on the black market are generally not cheap, let alone just a small piece of information. He carefully inquired about the price of the information. 90,000? The shop owner gestured with one hand and covered his mask with the other, calmly stating the true price. 900,000. When Moen heard this price, he directly froze on the spot. Afterwards, he turned around without hesitation and walked directly towards the door. No, thanks. It's not worth spending so much money just to know a small piece of information. Moen closed his eyes and was speechless at the expensive price offered by the shop owner. Damn it, earn me 9 times the price difference in front of me. This move is really underhanded. No, this black market is full of profit-driven people. Even if I spend money, they are likely to not only fail to help me in the future, but also add insult to injury. The cooperation object still needs to find someone who is honest and trustworthy. He pushed open the door and walked out directly. The shop owner waved his hand behind him and said in a lively tone, "Take care, young master. Welcome back next time." After confirming that there were no more people in the store, and that no one would be coming in for a while, the owner took off her hat and exposed her long black hair. She took off her mask and muttered to herself, "I thought tomorrow was just the coming-of-age ceremony for that useless young master from the Campbell family. I didn't expect that the third princess would also attend." However, at this critical moment, the Duke's mansion had to recruit outsiders due to a shortage of manpower. Ah, who should I sell this information to? I'm so distressed. After taking off the mask, it was the face of a young and beautiful girl. In fact, the real identity of the owner of this store is a student, and her name is Anna Kablin. She held a mask and looked at something with interested eyes, revealing a mischievous smile. I remember that the second prince seemed to have always disliked his excellent sister, and the Duke Raymond, who has always been at odds with the Grand Duke Campbell. This is such an interesting thing. Why don't I sell it well on both sides? Anna tapped her lips with her finger and said with a smile, "Playing both sides. I'm really bad." Time came to the next night, the day of Moen's coming-of-age ceremony. Night falls over the entire Duke Campbell's mansion, accompanied by stars and the moon. This is the backyard of the Duke's mansion. On the road, there were many nobles dressed up and traveling together to attend the coming-of-age ceremony of Moen at the Duke's mansion. Inside the Duke's mansion, many nobles were chatting and laughing with each other, discussing the arrangements for tonight's coming-of-age ceremony. Grand Duke Ron and Moen greeted every guest who arrived with a smile on their faces. Moen also bowed to each and every one of them, expressing his greetings. At this moment, a marquis greeted them with his daughter. The marquis gently patted his daughter and introduced her to them with a smile. "Duke, this is my third daughter. Come on, greet to the Duke." The daughter of the marquis seems very nervous and shy. She lowered her head, bowed slightly, and greeted them in a small voice. "I have met Grand Duke Campbell. I have met." When she lifted her head and met Moen's gaze, the expression in her eyes was not happiness, but fear. She gently covered her mouth with her hand, her body trembling uncontrollably. Moen also felt her emotions at this moment from her eyes, but he couldn't say anything either. The daughter of the marquis quickly turned around, picked up her skirt, and ran away with her eyes closed. She ran while speaking. "My mother is calling me. Sorry, I'll excuse myself first." The marquis felt embarrassed as he watched his daughter run away impolitely. The Grand Duke and Moen watched her run away in a daze, unable to inquire about what had happened. The marquis awkwardly touched his head and apologized to Moen on behalf of his daughter. "Sorry, Moen. My daughter is quite shy. I apologize on her behalf." Moen waved his hand, indicating that he did not care about her daughter's behavior just now. He said to him with a smile, "It's okay. I didn't take it to heart. We didn't greet each other properly. Please take a seat." After seeing off the marquis, he continued to greet the guests with a smile. However, he could clearly feel that the atmosphere inside the Duke's mansion was not quite right. Sure enough, not only the daughter of the Marquis Hill, everyone's eyes are almost the same. Due to the Marquis's daughter running away in front of him just now, there was some minor disturbance at the scene. Everyone's eyes peeked at Moen. Their eyes were filled with distrust, even disgust, towards him. It is obvious that they are very wary and afraid of him. Moen sighed. He closed his eyes, supported his forehead with his hand, and had a helpless expression on his face. For the actions of the original Moen Campbell, he also had no choice. Ultimately, it's because the original owner's reputation is too bad. The Grand Duke seemed to sense Moen's emotions and reached out to touch his head, expressing comfort. He said to him in a relaxed tone, "You performed very well today." Moen raised his head and expressed surprise at his father's behavior. He looked at his father and said in confusion, "Father?" The Grand Duke looked at Moen with a loving gaze and a smile. He confidently said to him, "I was a little worried before, but now it seems unnecessary. You are the protagonist of today's coming-of-age ceremony. From now on, you are no longer a boy, but a true man of the Campbell family. Keep up the good work." Encouraged by his father, Moen's previous feelings of disappointment were swept away. He looked ahead and confidently replied, "I'll try my best." The lights in the Duke's mansion shone on him, as if to illuminate his future. At this moment, a group of guards arrived at the door. They are neatly arranged at the door. A guard said to everyone at Duke Campbell's mansion, "Everyone, please be quiet." The Grand Duke and Moen noticed the sound at the door. They looked out the door together, surprised by the numerous guards. A young girl was surrounded by numerous guards and escorted into the Duke's mansion. The guards continued to announce to everyone, "Let us respectfully welcome the third-in-line heir to the Leopard Empire. The pure white child blessed by the ice and snow goddess." The nobles who were chatting near the door just now all made way and bowed together to the girl in the middle. Cecilia, the third princess of the empire. Cecilia walked quietly into the Duke of Campbell's mansion under the protection of the guards. She was wearing a deep blue and black interwoven dress, exuding the noble temperament unique to princes. She walked with an expressionless expression, exuding a cold elegance. She is like an elf in ice and snow, peaceful and noble. The third princess of the empire, Cecilia, came to my coming-of-age ceremony, and I personally welcomed her. As I was chatting with her, the tone of her speech sent chills down my body. At the same time, the brave Ariel and the holy maiden Lee also came to my coming-of-age ceremony. Although Ariel finds my personality changes strange, she is very wary and doesn't want me to get close to Lee. Then, the ball began. I invited Cecilia to dance with me, and hope she can come to my room. After welcoming Cecilia, other dukes also arrived one after another. Grand Duke Ron is going to greet the other dukes. He patted Moen's shoulder and said to him with a smile on his face, "I'm going to receive the other two dukes. I leave it to you. Remember not to neglect the Royal Highness Princess." Moen confidently said to his father, "I understand, father." Moen placed one hand on his chest, bowed to Cecilia, and walked towards her direction. Cecilia also noticed the protagonist of tonight's coming-of-age ceremony, Moen, from a distance. She took the initiative to talk to him. "Long time no see, young Master Moen." Moen smiled at her and praised her outfit for today. "Long time no see, Princess Cecilia." You are extraordinarily beautiful today. Cecilia didn't feel happy because of his words. She coldly replied to him. Is that so? Thank you for your compliment. But it's really rare to hear such praise from young Master Moen's mouth. Then, she lifted her skirt with both hands, leaned forward slightly, and bowed to Moen. Her movements flow smoothly, elegant, and beautiful, perfectly showcasing the princess temperament she possesses. Moen smiled politely, covered his chest with one hand, and bowed slightly, performing a return salute. He seemed to be able to hear that Cecilia was talking about his bad personality. Aha! Your Highness, what you're saying makes me seem like the kind of rude person who can't even control their mouth. Don't you think so? Suddenly, Cecilia looked at him with a cold gaze, and even lowered her tone when talking to him. Moen didn't know how to reply to her for a moment. He felt a chill from her tone of voice, spreading throughout his entire body. To ease the embarrassment, Moen smiled and immediately changed the topic. He reached out his hand and gestured for her to rest in the nearby rest area first. Haha, Your Highness must be tired from coming from the royal city. Why don't you go take a break first? The banquet won't officially start until a little later. Cecilia didn't say anything more about the topic just now. She followed his instruction and turned around to walk towards the rest area. Well, that would be appreciated. As Celicia's figure gradually faded away, Moen's tense emotions finally eased. He exhaled a breath and scratched his head with his hand. He was really a bit overwhelmed by the icy aura that Cecilia emitted. He silently said in his heart, "She's finally gone. Beautiful is really beautiful. Scary is also really scary. Worthy of being the first female lead in the novel, this aura is really scary." Cecilia walked towards the rest area and met two nobles again. The two nobles politely bowed to her, and she gently lifted the hem of her skirt in return. However, she seemed to be still thinking about Moen's every move and way of speaking just now. She noticed that he seemed somewhat different from before today. Today's him, I feel a bit different from before. She turned her head and secretly looked at Moen, who was still standing there receiving guests. She pondered with a puzzled expression. Is it because he has become a little more polite? At this moment, there was a slight commotion in the crowd, followed by some voices of discussion coming from within. This caught Moen's attention. Although the voice was very low, he could hear clearly what the nobles were discussing. He perked up his ears and listened carefully. I can't believe that illegitimate daughter is here. Is she the person who recently dueled with her betrothed partner? I heard that the Duke Bugard has just handed over the position of heir to her. Oh my, this person is not only an illegitimate child, but also a woman. How did she qualify to inherit the earldom? Moen turned his head to look towards the direction of the door, and the person the nobles were discussing had already walked in. I really don't know what Duke Bugard is thinking. The Duke is also present, don't let him hear. There is a tall girl and a short girl walking side by side. The nobles standing on both sides of the door secretly looked at them with unfriendly eyes. Although the nobles were still discussing them quietly with others, they seemed indifferent. Moen looked at them seriously. For these two people, he is the most familiar, especially the tall girl standing on the left. She has finally arrived. The true protagonist of the original story, the ultimate girl overlord of this world. Ariel Bugard. The tall girl on the left is the brave Ariel Bugard. The person standing on her right is the holy maiden Lee Angel. Because they didn't come in formal attire, they stood out among all the nobles. However, Ariel didn't care about these things. She crossed her hands on her chest and walked ahead with a cold expression. Lee seemed a bit scared of crowded places and kept pinching Ariel's clothes, hiding behind her. Ariel raised her hand and greeted Moen naturally. "Hey, young Master Moen. We meet again. How have you been lately?" Moen looked at her with a smile on his face. He raised his hand, about to greet Ariel with a polite gesture. Suddenly, someone stepped out from beside him. An obese nobleman wearing glasses suddenly stood in front of Moen. He pointed his hand very excitedly at Ariel and raised his voice, saying very rudely, "You lowly illegitimate daughter, how can you talk to our young master Moen?" Moen was stunned by his behavior and froze in place. He instantly felt something was wrong. If he let that nobleman continue talking, something big would happen. "Shut up." He immediately pounced on the obese nobleman with a frightened expression, covering his mouth with his hand and preventing him from continuing to speak. The obese nobleman was startled by Moen's movements and struggled with his hands in the air. He didn't expect Moen to suddenly do this. Ariel looked at the scene before her and felt speechless. Moen awkwardly forced a smile as he pressed his hand firmly over the obese nobleman's mouth. He said to Ariel nervously, "I have been doing well lately, Miss Ariel Bugard. Thank you for your concern." Ariel was somewhat stunned by Moen's sudden change in personality and polite response. She felt a little surprised and couldn't believe her eyes. "Huh? You?" She lowered her head, covered her mouth with her hand, and pondered why he had become like this. "What's going on here? This guy didn't call me a lowly, illegitimate girl like before." His brain, about the size of a nucleolus, can actually remember my full name. Has he come to his senses? Or is he having some conspiracy? Lee was not quite sure about the current situation. She looked at Ariel with worried eyes. "Ariel!" Suddenly, Moen greeted Lee. He politely reached out his hand and said to her in a relaxed tone, "You must be Miss Lee." Lee was startled by his sudden movement. She looked at him with fear and said in great surprise, "Ah, young Master Moen actually knows my name?" Moen slightly bent down and extended his hand forward, wanting to shake hands with her. He said to her gently with a smile on his face, "Of course. How could I not know the names of the important guests tonight? Miss Lee Angel." Just as Moen wanted to shake hands with Leah in a friendly manner, his hand was slapped away hard by Ariel. Moen was somewhat surprised by Ariel's behavior and stared at her blankly. She looked at him warily and said to him in an unkind tone, "What would you do?" She seemed to be under the mistaken impression that Moen was going to do something out of the ordinary to Lee. However, in reality, he didn't do anything strange. Lee looked at them nervously, feeling uneasy about the current situation. The nearby nobles heard Ariel's voice and looked towards them. Ariel approached Moen very angrily, her whole body pressed against Moen's chest. Moen felt that her emotions were not right and awkwardly leaned back. He lowered his head and said to her nervously, "Miss Ariel." Before he could finish speaking, Ariel spoke to him in an angry tone. "Moen Campbell, listen carefully." She looked at him with a disgusted expression and tapped his shoulder hard with her hand. "I came purely because of your father's face. I don't care what kind of plot you have, just come at me. If you dare to think anything against Lee, I'll never let you go." After issuing a warning to Moen, Ariel turned around and headed straight down the hall. Without looking back, she said to Lee, who was standing behind her, "Lee, let's go." Lee nervously turned around to look at Moen, while stuttering in response to Ariel's words. Moen looked at them without saying anything more, just watching them leave. Moen caressed his chest up and down with his hands, trying to ease the tension he had just experienced. He closed his eyes, awkwardly smiled, and silently said in his heart, "Ah, it seems that the misunderstanding between original Moen Campbell and her was really deep." Then he turned around and walked towards the second floor. He needs to prepare for his coming-of-age speech later. He looked ahead with a smile on his face, no longer worried about what would happen next. Well, forget it. As long as tonight passes, our fate will be two completely disjointed parallel lines. From now on, you will be your savior, and I will be my laborer. We will both have a bright future. Miss Girl Overlord. In no time, Moen's coming-of-age ceremony began. It began with his speech as the opening. He stood with his parents on the observation deck on the second floor. He bowed to the nobles and then began to deliver his speech. The nobles on the first floor all looked up, fixed their gaze on him, and listened attentively to his speech. So, under the guidance of my dear parents. Moen placed his hand on his chest and looked forward with a firm gaze. Whenever he finishes a speech, his parents standing behind him smile and applaud him. For their grown-up son, they are very happy inside. I, Moen Campbell, have completed my coming-of-age speech at the age of 18, witnessed by all the nobles of the empire. From today on, I can also be considered the official heir of the Campbell family, but unfortunately, when his parents were applauding for him, the nobles on the first floor smiled at him and joined them in applauding for him. Although he gave a coming-of-age speech according to the plot in the novel, he had to face what happened next. After tonight, the direction of his story in the novel will also change. The identity of this heir may only be limited to tonight. The speech lasted for a relatively long period of time. Finally, with warm applause from everyone, Moen concluded his speech. He exhaled and loosened his tie with his hand, allowing himself to catch his breath. He said with a sense of relief, "Finally, it's over." At this point, the coming-of-age ball has already begun. The nobles found their dance partners one after another and danced in the center of the hall. Moen looked at the crowd, pondering what he was preparing to do. Next, I should prepare for the main task. Moen glanced at the dance party and then at the nobles chatting beside him. He looked around, trying to find Celicia's figure. Princess Cecilia. Suddenly, he noticed a figure in front of the French window. Found her. That's Cecilia. She didn't attend the dance and stood alone in front of the French window. She held up red wine and quietly watched the night view outside the window. Moen went to the French window and bowed to Cecilia. He felt a little sorry for leaving her here alone. I unexpectedly let the noble Royal Highness Princess be left alone. It seems that I acted disrespectfully." Cecilia turned her head to look at him with some confusion. She raised an eyebrow. "Moen Campbell." Moen elegantly extended one hand and placed the other behind her, making an invitation gesture to Cecilia. "I don't know if I'm lucky enough to invite you to dance with me?" Cecilia asked in confusion. "Are you inviting me?" He answered her softly. "Of course, my beautiful highness." Cecilia hesitated for a moment, wanting to say something to him. However, at this moment, she couldn't say anything. She closed her eyes, sighed, and placed one hand on Moen's hand. Well, tonight is your coming-of-age ceremony. I naturally have no reason to refuse." Moen smiled and thanked her for accepting his invitation. "Thank you, Your Highness." At this moment, the nobles who were drinking and chatting were all looking in one direction. They all looked at the center of the dance floor with surprised eyes. Some nobles occasionally whispered to the people next to them about the scene in front of them. "Ah, that is. What?" Lee saw the person in the center of the dance floor and quickly tugged at Ariel's hem, reminding her to look over there. "Ariel, look!" Ariel, who was busy eating dessert, heard Lee calling her and looked up at the dance floor. She asked Lee in confusion. What's wrong?" Accompanied by music, Moen and Cecilia danced elegantly in the center of the dance floor under everyone's gaze. They held hands with each other, changing different dance moves. Cecilia danced slowly to his rhythm, while lifting her head and softly praising his dance steps. "Your dance steps are good." Moen smiled back at her and humbly said, "Thank you for your praise, but it's just at the beginner's level." Cecilia carefully observed Moen's face. Through tonight's conversation with him, Cecilia can confirm that there have been changes in him compared to before. "You have indeed changed a bit, Moen Campbell." Moen had some doubts about her words. "What aspect? Is it that I'm not behaving like a nobleman?" She said to him expressionlessly. "No, it's the way you invite people." Upon hearing Celicia's words, Moen became even more puzzled. Invitation method? He didn't quite know how the original Moen Campbell used to invite others. Cecilia explained to him. "I remember the last time you invited the daughter of a viscount to the Academy ball, you said that." Cecilia imitated the tone and expression of Moen's speech at that time. "Woman, rejoice and cheer. I have mercifully rewarded you with a dance with me." After listening, Moen awkwardly tilted his head aside. He didn't expect the original Moen Campbell to say so. He stuttered. "No, wait. Cecilia stared at Moen and returned to her original cold tone and said to him, "How is it? Did I imitate it well?" Moen smiled awkwardly at her. "It was my mistake. Your Highness Cecilia, can you please forget about that time?" At that moment, the band playing in the hall played the tune to the next part. The people on the dance floor also changed their dance positions. Moen and Cecilia changed their dance moves to another one. Cecilia leaned against Moen, who held her hand. He lowered his head and whispered in Celicia's ear. "After this dance, may I invite your Highness to come to my room?" Cecilia thought he had other ideas. She intends to reject him. "Moen Campbell, Although you and I are engaged, I understand, Your Highness. I have no intention of crossing over. Moen knew what Cecilia wants to say. In order to prevent her from rejecting him, he came up with a reason. What I want to discuss with Your Highness in detail is about the engagement. Cecilia raised her eyebrows gently. Oh? In order for the princes to agree to come to my room, I lied and said I wanted to discuss the engagement with her. After believing my words, the princes pulled me towards my room. I can only provide her with red wine and black tea in order to make the princes drink the potion. When the princess was about to drink the black tea with magic potion, she took the tea that was supposed to be mine. After drinking it, the princess fainted directly. I also took the opportunity to prepare according to the plot of the novel, waiting for the protagonist to appear.
At this moment, the band playing in the hall moved on to the next part of the piece. Moen and Cecilia changed their dance moves again and continued to dance slowly to the music. The nobles dancing around them follows the music and change their dance moves. Moen supported Cecilia while whispering to her, "Do you need to have a private discussion with me about our engagement?" In order to make Cecilia believe his words, Moen came up with corresponding lines in his mind based on their engagement. He held Celicia's hand with one hand, slowly approaching her and saying the lines he had already made up. "I know Your Highness doesn't like me, and our relationship is actually just a political marriage made by Your Majesty to maintain his relationship with my father." He looked at Cecilia with a smile and continued to explain the impact of the engagement. "This is the will of the king. If Your Highness proposes to cancel the engagement, it will inevitably affect the credibility of the royal family and the relationship between Your Majesty and you. Am I right?" Cecilia nodded in agreement with his statement. Then Moen leaned into Celicia's ear and whispered his own opinion on the engagement. "So, I think, at least when it comes to the issue of canceling our engagement, we are in agreement. If we work together, perhaps we can find a dignified way to terminate our engagement. What do you think, Your Highness?" After hearing his suggestion, Cecilia slightly widened her eyes. She didn't expect the person in front of her to have the same thoughts as her. Cecilia closed her eyes, pondered for a moment, and then gave him a plain answer. "I understand. This matter can only be discussed privately between you and me." Upon hearing Celicia's response, Moen smiled back. He was secretly happy in his heart that Cecilia had already believed what he said. She took the bait. "Sorry, Your Highness. In order for the plot to proceed smoothly, I can only..." Just as Moen was still immersed in the joy of Cecilia being deceived by him, Cecilia suddenly said to him, "Where is your room?" "Eh?" Upon Celicia's question, Moen froze in place. He didn't expect Cecilia to want to go to his room so soon. Perhaps Cecilia took Moen's words seriously and wanted to immediately go to his room to discuss ways to break the engagement. She eagerly grabbed his hand, wanting to take him away from the ball. She turned her head slightly to look at Moen and said to him, "Don't wait for the dance to end, let's leave now." Moen felt a bit at a loss about her sudden behavior. He staggered forward with her steps. Your Highness." Some nobles standing around noticed that the protagonist of the ball was heading towards another place. They looked at Moen and Cecilia with curious eyes. Cecilia walked ahead with Moen's arm. Due to her fast walking speed, Moen couldn't keep up with her pace, but it was also inconvenient to tell her. He could only let her take him away. At this moment, not far from the Duke's Hall, it seemed that someone was staring at their actions. In a corner where no one was paying attention, two mysterious maids were staring closely at Moen and Cecilia. One of the short-haired maids noticed the direction they were leaving. She put down the broom and said to the long-haired maid next to her, "She left with that idiot young master." The long-haired maid stole a glance and nodded. The two maids looked solemnly ahead, as if they had already decided what to do to them next. The short-haired maid planned to follow Moen and Cecilia alone. "Keep an eye out for me, I'll take care of it." The long-haired maid responded softly to her, not forgetting to remind her. Be quickly. After all, this is the territory of the Lionheart King. Fortunately, not many people noticed that Moen and Cecilia had already left the ball. Cecilia arrived smoothly at Moen's room. Moen took out a bottle of red wine and a wine glass from the room, and was about to bring it over to ask Cecilia if she was drinking, when Cecilia rejected him outright. "Sorry, I don't drink alcohol." Moen felt a bit embarrassed at this moment. "It's just red wine, drinking a little should." Red wine is also not allowed. Cecilia closed her eyes and elegantly lifted a strand of hair behind her ear. She explained to Moen, "My constitution cannot tolerate alcohol, not even a drop." Moen smiled awkwardly. He didn't expect Cecilia to not drink. He answered her hesitantly. "Ah, okay." Moen placed the red wine in his hand on the cabinet while secretly looking back at Cecilia. Due to her inability to drink red wine, he was unable to pour the red potion into the wine. At this moment, he felt a bit flustered. He silently said in his heart, "This isn't good." The novel does not describe how the princess fainted. "That potion is so red she doesn't drink wine, how can I pour it in?" Moen turned his head, smiled nervously, and asked Cecilia if she could change to another drink. "If your highness doesn't drink wine, what would you like to drink?" Cecilia thought for a moment and then answered Moen, "Coffee? Only black tea." Before she could complete the name of the drink, Moen immediately said the name of another drink that was still red. Cecilia was a little puzzled. Moen walked over to Celicia's side. He touched his chest with one hand, bowed slightly, and made an apologetic posture. Due to some uncontrollable factors, no other beverages are available here tonight except for red wine and black tea, so, although the lie was told, he still looked at her nervously, afraid that she would see something wrong. Cecilia covered her chin with her hand and lowered her head to think for a moment. "Is there only black tea? Then I'll have that." She didn't seem to think too much, so she asked Moen to brew her black tea. After Cecilia agreed to drink black tea, Moen happily searched for the black tea leaves in the cabinet. He said to her with a hint of joy, "Okay, I'll go get it now." Cecilia watched as Moen happily searched for tea leaves and brought a teapot and teacup to brew tea. Feeling a bit speechless, she watched his back expressionlessly and silently said in her heart, "Is brewing tea such a joyful thing for this guy?" Moen poured the brewed black tea into 2 teacups and placed them on the counter. He turned his back to Cecilia and blocked his entire body in front of the 2 teacups. He peeked back and, realizing she wasn't looking this way, snuck the 2 potions out. He nervously opened the lid of the red potion and dropped a few drops into one of the cups of black tea. He was worried that these few drops of magic potion might not be enough to make Cecilia faint, so he added a few more drops. Although a drop of alcohol can knock down an elephant, it's better to add a few more drops when facing a super powerful magician like Cecilia. Then he looked at the white potion in his left hand. "I don't know what this white bottle is, I still don't want." At this moment, Cecilia suddenly poked her head out from behind the wall. She asked expressionlessly, "Is the tea ready?" Moen was startled by Celicia's voice and accidentally pulled out the lid of the white potion. He exclaimed in surprise, "Ah!" Moen quickly turned around, his hands behind his back, and hid the 2 bottles of magic potion in his hands. He was worried that she would discover these 2 bottles of magic potion. He awkwardly smiled at her and said nervously, "Almost done." Cecilia stared at him for a while but didn't seem to notice anything strange about him. "Please wait for a moment, Your Highness." While talking to her, he secretly poured some magic potion into 2 cups of tea. Since she still needs to wait a little longer, she decided to go back to the sofa. She nodded to Moen, turned around and walked towards the sofa, continuing to sit and wait for his black tea. Moen was scared and broke into a cold sweat. He stared closely at Celicia's movements. When she returned to the sofa, he quickly turned around to face the cabinet. He closed his eyes, wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with his hand, and exhaled a breath. He was almost caught by Cecilia doing something inappropriate just now. Fortunately, he quickly reacted. Phew, scared to death. Fortunately, this potion doesn't have any magical fluctuations, otherwise I would have been caught by her. At this moment, Moen lowered his head as if he had noticed something on the floor. There is a red water stain on the floor, which seems to be the same color as the potion just now. He was very surprised, thinking that he had accidentally spilled the potion on the ground just now. He held his head in both hands sadly and screamed in his heart, "No!" At the thought of such an expensive magic potion being wasted by himself, Moen's entire body froze directly in place. He crumbled and reached out his hand towards the puddle of water stains, saddened by the fact that he had lost the opportunity to make money. Originally, this was an important material that I was going to make my first bucket of money by watering it down and dividing it into 10,000 portions to sell to others as sleeping pills after I was exiled. It's all gone. He could imagine the gold coins that were about to arrive flying away from him just like that. "Young Master Moen?" Cecilia called out his name and urged him again whether the black tea had been brewed. Moen quickly put 2 cups of black tea into the tray, holding it while responding to her call. "I'll be right there. Sorry for keeping you waiting." Moen walked towards the sofa with 2 cups of black tea. At this moment, they didn't notice that a black figure was secretly watching them outside the window, and then disappeared into the night. When Cecilia received the black tea, she lowered her head and her expression suddenly became somewhat serious. She seemed puzzled by the appearance of the black tea in her hand. The heat of the black tea drifted onto her face, making her feel even more strange about this cup of black tea. She hesitated for a moment and then said to Moen, Young Master Moen, your black tea? It's so red and it seems to glow?" She held a teacup in one hand and carefully observed the black tea. Unlike regular black tea in white porcelain teacups presents a bright red color similar to blood, and there is also something like glitter floating in the tea water. She has never seen this type of black tea before. After hearing Celicia's evaluation, Moen's mood suddenly became tense again, to the point where cold sweat broke out on his forehead again. He looked nervously at the ceiling and hesitantly explained the reason to her. This is a newly procured precious tea species from the Eastern Kingdom at my home, called Big Red Robe, right, that's the name." Cecilia didn't seem to care too much about Moen's statement. With a cold expression, she gestured for him to drink his tea first. "Is that so? Well, young Master Moen, you drink first." Moen thought Cecilia might have noticed that he had added something else to the black tea. This made him even more nervous. "Does your highness suspect that I have added something to my drink? Would I be the one to do such a thing?" Actually, Cecilia did not doubt him. She calmly said to him, "Young Master Moen is too sensitive. As the host, you should have tea first. This is the basic etiquette of nobility." Moen dare not continue thinking. Since Cecilia doesn't believe him, he can only take a gamble. "Okay, since your highness doesn't believe me, then I can only—" He picked up the teacup and was about to touch it with his mouth when Cecilia suddenly said to him, "Wait a moment." He stopped and looked at Cecilia. He didn't know why she suddenly stopped him. Cecilia observed beside for a while. Then she took the teacup from Moen's hand. She seems to be more interested in his tea. "Young Master Moen's tea seems to be a bit better than mine." She held Moen's teacup and smiled at him for the first time tonight. "How about we swap? I hope you don't mind." Moen looked at her nervously but couldn't say anything. Before Moen could answer, Cecilia brought the teacup to her lips and took a small sip. Suddenly, she felt her body becoming a bit strange. She widened her eyes. Moen noticed that she suddenly froze in place, motionless. He reached out and tried to call her name, wanting to ask if she was okay. "Your Highness." Then Celicia's body became unsteady. Her eyes became hazy and her face suddenly turned red. She looked at Moen in a daze but couldn't say the complete words. She felt her body lose strength and immediately collapsed towards the sofa. Her black tea didn't hold steady either. It slipped directly from her hand and fell onto the floor, spilling all over. She was lying on the sofa, her eyes closed, obviously unconscious. Moen was so scared that he quickly stood up. He remained silent and looked at her quietly for a while before realizing that she had stopped moving. It seems that the potion has already started to take effect. He was surprised by the effectiveness of this potion. Fortunately, I was smart enough to put the potion in both cups. Otherwise, I would have almost gotten into trouble. It's worthy of being a secret potion that can charm an elephant with a single drop. The merchant who sells magic potions didn't deceive me about its quality. However, it seems that the original text did not mention that the princess cannot drink alcohol. Could it be that Moen Campbell in the book also poured the potion into the tea? Am I just getting it right? Moen pinched his chin with his hand and began to recall the original plot of the novel. No, now is not the time to talk about this. In the original plot, not long after she fainted, Girl Overlord would come over. I need to prepare quickly. He messed up Celicia's clothes according to the plot of the novel. He gently pulled down her stockings a little. Pull down the stockings a little. Maybe I should also loosen her skirt a bit. He untied her skirt a little, but was also worried about her physical condition. This doesn't seem very good. If I untie the bottom, she will reveal her belly. This will catch a cold. Maybe I should just mess up my hair a little bit. After everything was ready, Moen found that his clothes had not been taken off yet. Oh, there are also my own clothes. He tried to take off his clothes according to the modern way of taking them off. However, this aristocratic outfit seemed somewhat difficult for him. Why is this outfit so difficult to take off? Phew, I finally took it off. After several attempts, Moen finally took off his clothes. He also got his hair loose. He hugged his chest with both hands and looked at the current scene with satisfaction. Cecilia lay unconscious on the sofa, with her clothes and socks taken off a bit. Moen has recreated the scene according to the plot of the novel. Now there is only one final step left before he is caught. Great success has been achieved. The rest is waiting for that girl Overlord.
I waited for the protagonist to come and save the princess. But after a long time, the protagonist still didn't come. I carefully analyzed the reasons and found that I accidentally changed the plot of the story. When I was still thinking of a solution, the princess suddenly pounced on me. Outside the room, the brave, who was supposed to come to the door of my room, was also guided back to the Duke's mansion hall by the maid. In an unknown room, two mysterious maids are preparing to embark on a mysterious plan.
After Cecilia drank black tea containing magic potion and fainted, Moen stayed in the room the whole time. He was waiting for the brave Ariel to break into his room and save the princess, and then his plot in the novel could end here. However, it was already time for Ariel to appear, but she didn't enter the room. Moen took out his silver pocket watch and confirmed the current time. What's going on here? Moen sat on the table with his clothes and pants off, looking at the time on his pocket watch with great confusion. He found that Ariel's appearance time had already passed a long time ago. He didn't understand why Ariel hadn't appeared yet. Half an hour has passed, according to the original plot. Shouldn't Ariel rush in quickly to save the princess and control me? What's going on now? Where is she? Suddenly, Moen seemed to remember something. He pinched his chin with his hand and recalled the original plot of the novel. Wait a minute. How was the plot of this section originally written? Little by little, Moen combed through the development of the story's plot, presenting several familiar images in his mind. In his recollection, a blonde maid didn't hold the tray steady and accidentally poured tea on Ariel's dress. He muttered to himself as he recalled it. If I remember correctly, it seems like Ariel's skirt was accidentally soiled by a very sick maid in the Duke's mansion. Later, this guy was on her way to the bathroom to find something to clean her dress. She noticed something unusual and looked me, who was about to do something indescribable to the princess, Pooh, the original Moen Campbell. Recalling this, Moen realized that there was something wrong with this whole incident. Wait a minute, a very sick maid? He furrowed his brows and opened his mouth slightly in surprise, sensing that something was not quite right. Noel. He loudly called out the name of the maid Noel. Yesterday, due to illness, she didn't see the road in front of her clearly and accidentally bumped into him. He noticed that she was still working while sick, so he asked her to go back to her room to rest and recruited new maids from outside to replace all the sick maids in the house. She must still be in her room at this hour. At this moment, Moen realized that he had already changed the plot of the original novel. He nervously turned around and looked at Cecilia lying on the sofa, feeling lost in the current situation. Gosh. Isn't this equivalent to changing the original storyline? Cecilia is still in a coma. Her face was flushed, her eyes closed, and her eyebrows were lowered, as if she felt discomfort in her body. Moen suddenly panicked when the story changed direction. He didn't know what to do next. If the original storyline is not followed, there is a high possibility that major events will occur in the subsequent development of the story. This is a huge problem, he called out softly. He turned his head and sat in place, anxious. However, at this moment, Cecilia opened her eyes groggily. She unconsciously activated the ice magic, emitting a terrifying chill, and slowly sat up from the sofa. She stared at Moen's back with very terrifying eyes and walked towards him. At this moment, Moen was still immersed in his own world, not realizing that Cecilia had already woken up. He lowered his head, covered his mouth with his hand, and quickly thought about the next solution. Calm down. Although something went wrong unexpectedly, the most crucial princess had already fainted. There must be a remedy now. Celicia's ice magic has spread behind Moen. At this moment, he felt that the temperature in his room seemed a bit different. The room that was originally somewhat hot was slowly starting to get colder at this point. He turned his head to the side and said in confusion, Why does the temperature seem to suddenly drop? The summer shouldn't be. Before Moen could finish speaking, he saw a pair of hands stretched out in front of him. He was very surprised and opened his eyes wide. Suddenly, Cecilia unconsciously unleashed ice magic of greater intensity. The blue magical energy blasted all the furniture in Moen's room away. The entire room was instantly enveloped in a large amount of coldness. Due to the overly powerful magic she unleashed, Moen's room was covered in ice crystals everywhere. The temperature of the room instantly plummeted to the same as an ice cellar. Moen didn't have time to react just now before he was already pounced on by Cecilia. Her entire body was now pressed on top of him, and from time to time, she was still emitting some cold air. Moen was frightened by Celicia's sudden action. He was so nervous that he couldn't even feel the temperature in the room. He looked at her in great surprise and didn't dare to sit up. He thought she already knew that he had poured something strange into the tea, so she was very angry and wanted to punish him. He explained to her very anxiously, "Your Highness, listen to me explain. It's not what you think. You drank the wine." At this moment, Cecilia suddenly spoke. "It's so hot." Moen widened his eyes and looked at her, not sure what was wrong with her now. Cecilia seems to be not very conscious. She held her flushed face in her hands, stuck out her tongue, and her eyes were hazy. She said to him in a daze, "My body wants to..." The Cecilia in front of him was a completely different person from the one just now. Moen realized that her current state was not right and thought she might be sick. He quickly propped himself up on the ground with his hands, trying to get up. "No! This state is incorrect! Your Highness, hold on, I'll go call a doctor right away." Cecilia seemed to know he wanted to leave, so she used ice magic to fix his hands on the ground. She slowly climbed onto Moen's body, gently touched his body with her hand, and then gently grasped his neck. "Your body is so cold. I like it." Moen was pressed under her, and her hands were imprisoned by ice magic, unable to move. He looked at her nervously. "Your Highness, wake up! Your Highness!" "Ariel, protagonist, help me quickly. If it continues like this, it's just a show and a real thing." Suddenly, Cecilia bent down, pressing one hand on his shoulder and the other on his neck, and forcefully kissed Moen. Moen was extremely shocked, and a slight blush also appeared on his face. He never expected such a thing to happen. At this moment, Somewhere in the Duke's mansion, the sound of fast walking resounded in the corridor. Then a familiar voice rang out. "Come on!" Ariel hurriedly walked down the hallway looking for a bathroom while wiping her skirt with a handkerchief. She lowered her head and looked at her dirty skirt, muttering to herself, "My dear Leah, how could she be so careless? The cake got all over my skirt." At this moment, Ariel stopped. She sensed a hint of something wrong. She looked up ahead and seemed to notice that there was someone staring at her in the area. The corridor in front of her was empty, only bright candle holders quietly illuminating the corridor. The doors of the rooms in the hallway were also tightly closed, as if no one was here. However, Ariel could clearly perceive that there was indeed someone's aura here. She looked around carefully for a moment and then asked a question towards the hallway. "Who is it? Who is here?" At this moment, a maid slowly walked out of one of the rooms. "Excuse me, miss." Anne closed her eyes, touched her chest with one hand, and politely bowed to Ariel. She kindly reminded her not to go any further. "This is a forbidden area of the Duke's mansion. Please turn back." Ariel expressed doubts about this. Is there any place in the vast Duke Campbell's mansion that guests cannot enter? She didn't know she had gone where she shouldn't have gone. Forbidden area? She continued to inquire curiously. "What kind of forbidden area is this?" Anne looked at her with a smile on her face and calmly answered her question. "Sorry, this is a confidential matter of the Duke's mansion. I'm not authorized to explain." Upon hearing that Anne was unable to provide her with clear information, Ariel hugged her chest with both hands and looked at Anne with a slightly unhappy expression. She whispered a sentence. How stingy. At this moment, Anne noticed the stains on Ariel's skirt. She squatted in front of Ariel and observed her dress. "Miss, it seems like your skirt is dirty," Ariel replied. "Yeah, I'm looking for a bathroom." Anne offered to help her clean her skirt. "Let me help you with this small matter." She reached out her hands and approached Ariel's dress, gathering magical energy in her own hands. Clean. The green magic energy cleaned the stains off Ariel's dress, making it look as clean as it had been washed. Ariel lowered her head and looked at Anne's ability to cast magic, feeling somewhat surprised. She didn't expect the Campbell family to be so powerful that even the hired maids could use magic, she said with a slight surprise. "Oh, worthy of the Campbell family. Do all maids know how to use magic?" Anne withdrew her hand and humbly replied, "I only know a little, not worth mentioning." After cleaning Ariel's skirt, Anne stood up and took out a handkerchief to wipe her hands. She smiled and said to Ariel, who was still looking at her dress, "It's already cleaned, miss. Also, let me remind you, in a little while, the banquet will offer a limited number of pachichi cakes. If you like it, please don't miss it." Pachichi cake. Upon hearing the name of this cake, Ariel's eyes suddenly lit up. She clenched her two small fists excitedly, and her saliva couldn't stop flowing. She was very happy to be able to eat her favorite dessert at Duke Campbell's mansion. She was worried that the limited number of cakes would be sold out, so she quickly turned around and prepared to run back to the hall. She turned slightly and waved to Anne, saying goodbye to her. She smiled and expressed her gratitude for cleaning her dress just now. "Thank you for your help, Miss Maid. I have to go grab the cake." Anne also waved her hand gently. "You are welcome. Take care." Anne smiled as she watched her leave, until Ariel's figure gradually faded away and disappeared at the end of the corridor. Then she put down her hand. She withdrew her smile, turned back indifferently, and looked towards a certain part of the hallway, as if there was some unspeakable secret there. Ariel ran forward while recalling her interaction with Anne just now. She had actually noticed something strange about Anne. Since she didn't want to care too much about the Campbell family, she didn't say anything. She whispered, "That maid is a bit strange. She has a bloody smell on her body, and the other person hiding is also a bit suspicious. But what does this have to do with me? Anyway, she's causing trouble at the Duke's mansion, so it definitely won't involve me. As for Her Highness Cecilia, well, Her Highness is already such a mature person, and she is also a young and top-notch magical genius. Can she still be eaten by that stupid playboy? She noticed Cecilia taking Moen's hand and leaving the ball. However, she didn't worry too much about Celicia's safety, considering the power of her abilities. In summary, Ariel's main concern now is the limited quantity of pachichi cakes. If she doesn't run faster, she's worried that she'll be robbed by other nobles. She firmly looked ahead and quickened her running speed. Now! Nothing is more important than my pachichi cake. I'm coming. My dear Pachichi. In a dark room in the hallway, the short-haired maid was holding a dagger and leaning against the wall. She tilted her head and listened cautiously to the movements outside the door. It seems that as soon as someone breaks in, she will immediately kill them. Until Ariel's footsteps had disappeared into the hallway, she whispered to the long-haired maid. That girl has left. Is she also your mission target? The long-haired maid answered her. No, she was originally the target of number 9. Number 9 was my former partner, so I know some information about her. The long-haired maid was kneeling on one knee. She gathered magical energy on her fingers and drew a red magic formation on the ground. She seemed to be trying to invade the Campbell house through the magic circle. When the short-haired maid heard her mention the code name, she remembered something that happened earlier. Number 9, I remember it was a mission failure. The long-haired maid knew what she was talking about, so she continued her words. Right, it's that girl who surpassed her by 2 great realms but was killed in return. After confirming that there were no more people outside the corridor, the short-haired maid retracted the dagger at her waist. As soon as the maid with long hair reminded her, she knew who she was referring to. Then she realized that the long-haired maid had been drawing magic circles for a bit too long. She turned her head and frowned slightly, reminding the long-haired maid to pay attention to the time. It turns out to be her. By the way, how much longer do you need? There is not much time left for us. The long-haired maid answered her. Soon. After all, it was something laid down by the Lionheart King Ron Campbell. Although it is a massive object covering the entire duchy, it is not so easy to quietly open the gap without disturbing him. The short-haired maid seems a bit anxious. She urged the long-haired maid to move faster. We need to hurry up. If Moen Campbell or Princess Cecilia suddenly come out, our mission will be considered a failure. Due to the fact that drawing magic circle consumes a lot of her energy, the long-haired maid cannot immediately invade the Campbell family. Some sweat dripped down her face as her fingers sped up the drawing of the magical array. However, she doesn't seem to be worried about not having enough time. I know, but I think there's still plenty of time. Just now, when I was exploring the exterior wall, it seems like they are doing that kind of thing. The long-haired maid remembered when she was secretly observing them outside just now. She looked through the window of Moen's room and saw what was happening inside. The short-haired maid didn't understand what she was saying for a moment. She asked her in confusion. That kind? At this moment, in the room, Cecilia, who was unconscious, was lying on Moen's body and forcibly kissing him. Moen was pinned down by her, unable to move at all. He was still in shock from her kiss.
After a period of intense biting, the princess finally calmed down. However, the princess was very angry about this matter and intended to punish me. I had intended to calm her emotions first, but the princess refused to listen to my explanation. Just then, a maid with short hair came to the door and claimed to be delivering dessert. Just as I was suspecting the identity of the maid, she rushed straight towards the princess. The princess is currently in crisis.
Moen lay on the ground, with a weak face and a lot of sweat flowing from his body. Celicia's white stockings were casually thrown on his head by her. He gasped for breath while silently saying in his heart, "Finally, it's over." Just now, Cecilia, who had drunk black tea containing magic potion, crazily vented her emotions to Moen. She not only nibbled on Moen's chest and arms, but also left one red scratch after another on his body. After a while, Cecilia finally calmed down. He recalled Cecilia venting on him just now. He kept dodging the attack from Cecilia just now. finally restraining himself from doing something that would lead him to that extent. I tried my best to dodge her and finally saved my pure body. Otherwise, if I take the last step and really do something like that to the princess, the outcome that awaits me is probably not exile, but really ruin. But now it seems that the situation is also similar. Moen closed his eyes, feeling helpless about the current situation between him and Cecilia. At this moment, as he was still immersed in his own world, he did not notice that a sword had appeared on his face and pointed at him. Cecilia held a sword condensed from ice magic, pointing with a serious expression and angry emotions towards Moen, who was still lying on the ground. She said coldly, "Say your last words, Moon Campbell. This is your last chance before you die." Just now her clothes had become a bit tattered due to her emotional outburst against Moen. However, it didn't matter. She was very angry at Moen for pouring an unknown drug into her tea. Seeing Cecilia, who was clearly not in the right mood, Moen got a little nervous. He braced his hands on the ground and slowly stepped back while smiling awkwardly at her, intending to muddle through. "So if I don't say it, I won't." Upon hearing that Moen had no intention of saying her last words, Cecilia decided to kill him directly. She cast her own ice magic, emitting a stronger frost aura. "Since you have no last words," Moen noticed that what he had just said not only did not stabilize Celicia's emotions, but also made her even angrier. He took a few steps back in fear and raised a hand, trying to stop her from using magic. Wait a minute! I do. Let me think about it." For the current situation, Moen feels at a loss. Due to Celicia's extreme anger now, Moen was worried that she would rush towards him with her sword in the next second. This is too bad. If I hadn't managed to calm her down, I wouldn't have had to wait for the guillotine. I'd have been done for right then and there. I don't know if there will be a second chance of rebirth. He had to calm her emotions first. He was rapidly thinking of a solution in his mind. Given the circumstances, I can only use my modern wisdom to take a gamble. Moen lifted his head and spoke the modern language he had thought of to Cecilia. Once there was a sincere love in front of me that I didn't cherish properly. I didn't regret it until I lost it. Cecilia lowered her head, still holding her sword towards him. She frowned slightly and heard Moen saying something she had never heard before. "If God could give me another chance?" Moen looked at Cecilia with sincere eyes and deep affection. He placed one hand on his chest, as if it would make him appear more sincere. He hoped that Cecilia could stabilize her emotions due to his modern language. Unfortunately, Cecilia was not moved by his words. She wrapped the entire sword in ice magic. She raised her sword and swung it forcefully towards Moen's head. In an instant, several strands of his hair were cut off by the sword. He raised his hands and looked at the top of his head in great fear. He was so scared that he let out a scream. Yikes! Cecilia narrowed her eyes slightly and looked at him, her expression becoming more serious. She had no faith in what he said about love. She thought he could realize his mistake, but ended up wasting her time with such a long piece of nonsense. She felt even angrier about his lack of remorse. She held up her sword and augmented the ice magic on her body quite a bit more. "I see, is this your disgusting reason?" Moen's eyes flicked to the side. He scratched his head and smiled at her, trying to diffuse the awkwardness of the situation. Disgusting? In a sense, this can also be considered a very sincere emotion, and in fact, we haven't taken that step forward. So today, do you call this dirty, nasty tactic sincere? What are you joking about, Moen Campbell? Cecilia shouted at him loudly. Hearing Moen say such words so unashamedly, she felt extremely angry. For someone like him who drugged her and turned her into that unpleasant appearance just now, how could there be any genuine emotions? She didn't approve of this kind of dirty person who would do anything to make him like her. If you really like me, you should stand in front of me openly and honestly, and use your character, your strength, and your sincerity to impress me like a real man. If I still don't like you after you do that, maybe in the end, I will also follow the engagement and become your wife. Moen froze in place, slightly widening his own eyes to look at Cecilia. He had never seen her lose her composure and get angry with him before. But you chose to poison this most despicable and shameless means. Although Cecilia was still pretending to be strong, her heart was hurt by Moen. Her emotions could no longer be controlled. She lowered her head slightly, tears streaming down her face. She gently wrapped her hand around herself, trying to calm her emotions at the moment. She couldn't forgive Moen for doing something that made her angry and sad. Seeing Cecilia so heartbroken, Moen also felt a pang of guilt, realizing that he might have gone too far. At this point, he had no other choice but to apologize and come clean with her. "I'm sorry, Cecilia. I need to be honest with you. I had no other choice but to act this way. I just wanted a result, and had no intention of doing those offensive." However, Cecilia could no longer listen to any of Moen's words now. As soon as Moen intended to stand up, she immediately swung the sword in her hand towards him. She said angrily while shedding tears, "Shut up, kneel down." Just as Celicia's sword was about to touch Leon's body, there was a knock on the door outside the room. Cecilia noticed the knocking on the door and cautiously looked towards it. Moen, who was kneeling on the ground, also looked towards the direction of the door. Cecilia put down her sword, grabbed Moen's neck with her other hand, and lifted him up forcefully. She coldly issued a warning to him. "Tell the people outside to leave." Moen was choked by him, and his whole body was trembling with discomfort. He raised his hand, wanting her to loosen it a bit, but he didn't dare to struggle casually. He answered her intermittently. "No, this room is soundproof. No sound can come in except for knocking on the door, and the sound inside cannot get out." Cecilia felt somewhat dissatisfied. She didn't want anyone outside to come in and know what had happened in this room, but now she couldn't stop it either. She lifted her head and showed a disdainful expression towards him. Cecilia released the hand that was holding onto Moen's neck and threw him to the ground. She gave him orders coldly. "I'll spare your life for now. Put on your clothes and open the door." Moen suddenly lost his balance and fell to the ground. He covered his uncomfortable neck while lifting his head to respond to Celicia's words. "Yes, yes." Moen quickly found and put on the clothes he had thrown somewhere in the room. He accidentally changed the plot of the story, so much so that he couldn't predict what would happen next. He helplessly closed his eyes and tidied up his collar with both hands. He silently analyzed the outcome in his heart that he could know. This is really bad. Now I only have 3 possible outcomes left. I'll either be killed by Cecilia herself, publicly hanged by the angry king, or, like in the dream, cut to pieces in the dungeon by an unknown person. No matter which one, it's a dead end. Seizing the moment when Moen went to open the door, Cecilia tidied up her dress and quickly picked up the tattered stockings, sitting on the sofa and putting them on. She doesn't want to be noticed for her disheveled appearance. Her eyes remained cautiously focused on the direction of the door, paying attention to any movements there. After finishing his clothes, Moen opened the door with a helpless expression. He sighed softly, assuming that the person coming through the door was Ariel, who had just rushed over not long ago according to the direction of the plot. "So, protagonist, I almost did that kind of thing. What's the use of you only coming now?" However, the voice of the person outside the door was not Ariel's voice. "Young Master Moen." Moen opened his eyes. When he saw that the person outside the door was not his familiar Ariel or Anne, he felt a little surprised. He looked at her with confusion. The short-haired maid stood at the door of Moen's room, holding a plate of dessert and hot tea. She smiled at him and expressed her intention of coming here. "The madam saw that you talked with Royal Highness Princess for a long time and thought you should be hungry. She specially asked me to send some dessert. It turns out that the maid just came over to deliver some food." Moen's tense mood relaxed a bit. He expressed his gratitude to the short-haired maid. "Oh, thank you." He extended one hand and gestured for the short-haired maid to bring the dessert and tea into the room, while using the other hand to close the room door. "Just put it on the table over there." The short-haired maid smiled and turned around, indicating that she had received instructions from him. "Okay." The short-haired maid carried a tray and walked towards the nearby table. At this moment, Moen felt that the maid in front of him was not very familiar. He seems to have never seen her at home. He stood behind her and observed for a while, then said to her in confusion, "Hey, wait, how come it seems like I've never seen you before?" Upon hearing that Moen seemed to have doubts about her, the short-haired maid stopped. She closed her eyes and still smiled at him. She explained to Moen, "I was only elected to the Duke's mansion last night. It's normal for young Master Moen not to know me." Moen recalled yesterday's incident, and indeed she had told Anne to let the sick maids rest in their rooms and recruit new maids to cope with the shortage of maids in the Duke's mansion. However, when he saw the maid's attire, he remembered what Anne had said to him yesterday. "Oh, are you here to help with the banquet?" But I remember Anne said that because there were no extra maid uniforms, they only hired ordinary servants. Is that so? The next second, the short-haired maid opened her green eyes and her expression quickly changed from a smile to a cold one. Since Moen has discovered it, there is no need for her to continue acting. The short-haired maid cast her magic, enveloping herself in black magical energy and using it to charge into the room. Due to the intense magic she unleashed, the desserts and tea in her hands were thrown out. Moen was also influenced by her strong magical fluctuations and was blown to the position at the door of the room. He just realized that the short-haired maid was not an ordinary person. An assassin! He bumped into the door and fell to the ground. This made his back feel a wave of pain. However, he opened his eyes and noticed that the maid was rushing into the room instead of towards him. Just as he was pondering why, suddenly he realized that Cecilia was still sitting on the sofa. He looked at the sofa in shock. "Wait, it's not for me, then it is." "Cecilia." Cecilia looked at the commotion in the direction of the door in shock. Then, a maid with strong magical energy rushed towards her at a very fast speed. However, she just sat quietly on the sofa waiting for Moen to open the door, without taking any protective measures. The short-haired maid jumped into mid-air with the help of magical energy and raised 2 daggers hidden around her waist, cutting at Cecilia. The strong magical aura she emitted made people feel scared. Immediately afterwards, the black magic energy collided with the blue magic energy, emitting a huge energy shockwave, causing some of the furniture in Moen's room to be blasted away. Moen crossed his hands again and raised them in front of him to protect himself. Their magical aura caused a gust of strong wind, even so intense that it was about to blow him away. The strong wind blew some furniture debris towards him, forcing him to close his eyes. He tried to lean against the door and maintain his body balance. Due to concerns about Celicia's condition, he slowly opened his eyes to confirm if she was safe now. "Cecilia." Then a sound of weapon impact echoed through the room. When Cecilia realized that the purpose of the short-haired maid was her, she immediately summoned the ice sword and blocked her 2 daggers. The short-haired maid is not to be outdone. She clenched her weapon tightly and pushed toward Cecilia with all her strength. Cecilia didn't provoke anyone tonight. How could an assassin suddenly come to kill her? She guessed in her heart that there would be no one else besides the brother who hated her. She tentatively asked the short-haired maid, "Did my foolish brother send you here?" The short-haired maid sneered disdainfully. She doesn't need to tell Cecilia too much information. Then she put down harsh words to Cecilia. "Sorry, the employer's information is top secret, and you don't need to know, Your Highness. Today you will surely die here." Suddenly, for some unknown reason, several golden magic circles appeared on the walls of Moen's room. These magic circles condense magical energy into golden orbs of light. Then the short-haired maid loudly announced to Cecilia, "The 3rd princess of the Empire was assassinated at the Duke of Campbell's mansion. This is your finale." Subsequently, these light balls transformed into one lightsaber after another and shot towards Cecilia. The golden light shone on Cecilia, making it difficult to see how she would respond to them.
The assassin summoned the magic circle with the intention of killing the princess. But the princess blocked the attack with her own magic. I was powerless and planned to escape, but found that the door was locked by an assassin. I'm wondering if I've changed the story plot once again, because of myself. The princess and the assassin are fighting fiercely, and the assassin is about to be suppressed. At this moment, the assassin pulled out a mysterious potion and suppressed the princess's magic. The princess without magic is about to be killed by the assassin.
The short-haired assassin summoned several unknown golden magic circles in Moen's room. The magic array condenses golden energy into golden swords, and the entire room emits a strong golden light. They aimed at Cecilia and flew towards her. The short-haired assassin quickly jumped back to a safe position to avoid the falling sword. One huge sword after another quickly landed at the position where Cecilia had just stood, emitting a strong explosion sound. The explosion ignited Moen's room, and suddenly the room was filled with flames. The falling sword also chopped the furniture in the room into pieces, raising strong dust that made it difficult to see how Cecilia was doing. The short-haired assassin landed in a safe position and maintained her body balance. She lifted her head and clenched 2 daggers tightly. The firelight shone on her face. She looked at the explosions and flames emanating from Celicia's position, with a confident and sinister smile on her face. Such a large-scale attack, Cecilia will definitely be unable to withstand it, she proudly said. Such a dense magic assault, even a Santa Maria College instructor would only be able to. However, after a while, the flames and explosions instantly disappeared, and in their place, very icy cold air and ice took over the entire room. Ice crystals and cold air came towards the assassin maid. She slightly widened her own eyes and froze in place. Then she heard the sound of Cecilia reciting an incantation. Ice, take form. Frost, turn into a spear. Grant the power of supremacy. Cecilia rushed out of the thick smoke with a serious expression. Her hands held a long spear condensed from ice magic energy. She jumped into midair, raised her long spear, and charged towards the short-haired assassin. Cecilia attached ice magic to the long spear and then stabbed it at the short-haired assassin. The short-haired assassin reacted quickly when he saw Cecilia rushing towards her. She bent back and stabilized her body. She raised a dagger in one hand to resist Celicia's long spear attack. 2 weapons collided, unleashing strong waves of magical energy. Cecilia looked down at the short-haired assassin with a cold expression. The attack that the short-haired assassin just launched on her seemed to have no effect on her, and she didn't even feel scared because of it. She unleashed ice magic again and launched another attack on the short-haired assassin. The short-haired assassin did not expect Cecilia to be able to withstand the attack of such a powerful magic circle just now, and even protrude from the encirclement of the magic circle. She desperately resisted Celicia's attack, but her face was still scratched by flying ice crystals, and some blood flowed out. She glared angrily at Cecilia with a dissatisfied expression on her face. Due to Celicia's sudden attack, she was temporarily suppressed by her ice magic. At this moment, Moen, standing near the door, noticed that Cecilia and the short-haired assassin had started fighting. Celicia's ice magic has a wide range of activation, and even some ice crystals have flown to the vicinity of Moen. Moen covered his face with his hand to avoid being accidentally injured by the ice magic, while slowly groping for the door handle of the room, intending to escape directly. He nervously said to himself, "Damn it, gods fight, mortals suffer. I can't stay here, otherwise I wouldn't know how I died." After touching the door handle, he pressed down hard and found that the room door seemed to be closed. He tried opening the door a few more times, but the door handle remained motionless and couldn't be pressed down no matter how hard he tried. Moen noticed the seriousness of the matter. He widened his eyes and showed a frightened expression. "It's locked?" At this moment, Cecilia and the short-haired assassin were in a fierce battle. Celicia's ice magic once again fell near Moen. Moen was so scared that he quickly found a place to hide. He found a table not far behind him. He lay on the ground, dodging the ice magic from Cecilia over and over again, while awkwardly crawling towards the table. He feels helpless about the current situation. Damn it! After safely climbing behind the table, Moen poked his head out and carefully observed the battle between Cecilia and the short-haired assassin. When they were fighting each other, some sawdust and magical energy would occasionally hit the area near him, but he couldn't control them temporarily. He silently analyzed the current situation. The door was tampered with. This must be done by this maid. But this shouldn't be. The section about assassins doesn't even exist in the original novel. How could the Duke's mansion? At this moment, Moen seemed to have remembered something. He suddenly widened his eyes and recalled what he had said to Anne last night. Wait, could it be? In memory, Moen prepared to leave the hallway and return to the room. He turned his head and said to Anne standing behind him, "That's how it was decided. Tell the head maid to arrange for all unwell servants to rest, and for vacant staff to be recruited from outside. I don't want a large group of mentally confused patients to cause inconvenience to the guests at tomorrow's coming-of-age ceremony." Moen realized that this was a huge mistake he had made. Because he requested to recruit external maids to help the Duke's mansion, it led to assassins sneaking in. He opened his mouth slightly in surprise. "It's my command? How is this possible?" Seeking external assistance was a temporary decision made just last night. Could it be that someone has been surveilling the Duke's mansion 24 hours a day? At this moment, Cecilia fired a magical ice cone at the short-haired assassin, accidentally hitting the table that was used as a defensive weapon for Moen. The ice cone exploded directly on the surface of the table, turning into countless small ice cones scattered around the table. After hearing the explosion, Moen screamed in fear and immediately covered his head with both hands to prevent being injured by the ice cone. He covered his head with one hand while looking sideways. Cecilia and the short-haired assassin fought fiercely, never even stopping. With someone like him who has neither magic nor force, going out to fight is impossible to defeat an assassin. At present, I can only pray that Cecilia can defeat the assassin. After all, my physical fitness cannot participate in the battle of this level. But Moen quietly poked his head out and looked nervously at Cecilia and the short-haired assassin. Due to his reasons, the plot of the story has changed. He is also difficult to predict what the future story will become. He began to worry a little about what would happen next. The assassin's target is clearly only Cecilia. Now I have unintentionally changed the original story, and I don't know what will happen in the future, but for now, is Cecilia winning really a good ending? Cecilia seems to have stopped attacking the short-haired assassin. She held a long spear in her hand and looked ahead with a serious expression. The blue ice magic energy surrounded her, emitting waves of icy coldness. Although her attire had become a bit tattered due to the battle, the princess-like aura that belonged solely to her did not dissipate as a result. If Cecilia unfortunately dies here, won't no one know what just happened? Moen closed his eyes and pondered the question seriously. Whether Cecilia wins or loses, it may lead to a change in the storyline in another direction. This makes Moen very worried. Suddenly, Moen heard the voice of the short-haired assassin speaking. Truly a super genius chosen by the gods, Princess Cecilia. He opened his eyes and quietly listened to her conversation with Cecilia. Although Cecilia had slight abrasions on her face and body, she still stood straight. She held her long spear and explained to the short-haired assassin what type of magic she had just used. Sudden bursts of footwork, light arrow magic, and gravity magic that makes my body heavy. The last two spells have no magic power to activate. It must be the means of the assassin in the next room. Cecilia had been aware for some time that the assassin wasn't solitary. Another lurked in a separate room. You can see through our magic at a glance, just like what was rumored. No, the hearsay is not accurate enough. I have also killed a magical genius. Even in the realm of genius, you can be considered a monster. Cecilia was able to quickly recognize the magic she was using, and the short-haired assassin praised Celicia's insight. Although her clothes had become a bit tattered due to the battle with Cecilia, Frost had formed on some parts of her face and clothes. It seems that the magic of ice magic is very powerful. Cecilia unleashed ice magic, transforming her long spear into an energy of ice magic, which then condensed into a long sword. She clenched her long sword tightly and pointed at the short-haired assassin, saying coldly to her, "Tell the person behind the scenes who instructed you, and I will spare you from death." "Is that so?" The short-haired assassin doesn't seem to intend to reveal the name of her employer. She found Celicia's demands ridiculous. She clenched 2 daggers tightly and raised her hand, making a gesture of wanting to attack. She gave a sinister smile and then said to Cecilia, "Actually, as an assassin, I shouldn't have talked too much nonsense with you, but sometimes, even an assassin, I also need to stall, don't I?" She opened her green eyes and looked at Cecilia. She showed an expression that her plan had already succeeded. Her words seemed to be about to carry out some unknown and sinister plan. At this moment, a sudden vibration came from Moen's room. Some gravel and dust fell from the ceiling. Not long after, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared on the wall. The long-haired assassin hiding in the next room knelt down with her hands on the ground and activated the golden magic circle. Due to the fact that this magic circle consumes a lot of her strength, she loudly reminded the short-haired assassin, "The room is completely sealed. Hurry up! I can't maintain this for long." "Got it." The short-haired assassin hid a dagger behind her waist and reached into the pocket of her skirt to search for something. Then she took out a glass bottle from her pocket, which contained some red liquid. The black magical energy emanating from the bottle enveloped the short-haired assassin, making one feel somewhat fearful. She lifted the bottle, looked up at it, and recited a spell in her mouth. "With the blood of 100 innocent children, I offer this sacrifice to the molten god, Lord of the Crimson Sun, the great withering king." Evil god! After hearing the familiar name, Cecilia felt something was off. She clenched her long sword tightly and looked solemnly at the short-haired assassin. The short-haired assassin still hasn't stopped reciting spells. The black energy surrounding her slowly gathered into the blood bottle. "Please grant us." Realizing that the bottle in the hands of the short-haired assassin was about to burst with immense magical energy, Cecilia rushed over immediately. She activated the ice magic and swung the sword in her hand towards her. She wants to stop her from continuing to cast magic. Unfortunately, it's already too late. When Celicia's sword was about to strike the neck of the short-haired assassin, the bottle had already cracked, and the blood inside suddenly boiled violently. The assassin, with a very sinister smile, uttered the last spell. Suppress the power of wind and snow. In an instant, the bottle suddenly exploded and all the blood inside flew toward Cecilia. The room was immediately shrouded in red blood, which looked very terrifying. These blood with evil god energy split into blood bullets, immediately devouring Celicia's ice magic and even bouncing her out. Cecilia fiercely bumped into the bookshelf in the room before stopping. The books on the bookshelf also fell down due to her impact. Although she felt a great pain in her back, she slowly lifted her head, gritted her teeth, and cursed the short-haired assassin with an angry expression. "Evil priest, you mice in the sewer dare to appear in front of me!" The short-haired assassin casually threw away the cap of the blood bottle. Celicia's ice magic has been suppressed, and she has nothing to fear anymore. She clenched the dagger in her hand with a relaxed expression and slowly walked towards her. She said contemptuously to Cecilia, "Mouse? Indeed, for Royal Highness Princess, we may seem like nothing more than vermin. But the noble Royal Highness Princess." Suddenly her expression became grotesque and twisted, and she quickly rushed towards Cecilia. "You're about to die at the hands of a mouse!" Cecilia noticed that the short-haired assassin was about to rush over and kill her, so she quickly observed her surroundings. She lowered her head and noticed a dagger with a red blade near her. She quickly grabbed the dagger. "Ha ha 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 ha!" The short-haired assassin showed a crazy expression, laughing wildly while quickly waving the dagger in his hand and cutting towards Cecilia. Her attack speed is very fast, even causing a large amount of blood to splash out. Cecilia clenched the red dagger tightly, desperately resisting her attack. At this moment, she suddenly stopped attacking. She showed an unexpected expression as she looked at Cecilia standing in front of her. Huh? Cecilia trembled and maintained her balance so as not to fall to the ground. She held the dagger. Although she blocked the quick attack of the short-haired assassin, there were many bloody wounds on her face and body. The skirt and socks also became even more tattered in resisting the attack just now. The short-haired assassin commented on her when he saw that she was still standing. Interesting. I didn't expect that besides magic, your swordsmanship is also good, and you managed to avoid all important parts of your body. Since the sharp slash just now failed to make Cecilia fall, the short-haired assassin decided to continue attacking until she had no strength to resist. After all, Cecilia cannot use magic now, and she cannot hold on for too long. The short-haired assassin quickly punched forward, and Cecilia urgently dodged the punch backwards. She said very arrogantly, "But without your ice magic, you're nothing but a helpless lamb waiting for slaughter." The short-haired assassin raised his leg again and aimed a kick directly at Celicia's waist. At this moment, Cecilia was very weak and was kicked out before she could react. She violently bumped into a wooden cabinet in the room again, emitting a strong impact sound. The wooden cabinet was smashed into several pieces, raising thick dust. After the thick smoke dissipated, Cecilia still hadn't fallen. She slowly stood up and walked towards the short-haired assassin. Her body had several bloody wounds, and her blood had already soaked her dress. She bent slightly, panting weakly, and her gaze became somewhat unfocused. She grabbed her arm to maintain her balance. The short-haired assassin saw Celicia's appearance and guessed that she no longer had any power to rebel. She happily turned the dagger in her hand, revealing an arrogant smile. Phew, comfortable. The time is also about the same. Next, princess, your head. I'll be taking it now. The expression of the short-haired assassin suddenly became distorted. She clenched the dagger in her hand and fiercely stabbed Cecilia. She thrust the dagger forward with such force and a lot of blood immediately splattered out. However, she seemed somewhat surprised by the person in front of her. She slightly widened her eyes, somewhat unable to believe what she was seeing. Cecilia stared blankly at the person with yellow hair in front of her. He stood in front of her, and his blood even splattered onto her. Seeing Cecilia in crisis, Moen rushed over and stood in front of her, blocking the knife. His chest was immediately stained red with blood. His gaze became unfocused, and a cold sweat broke out on his face. Cecilia looked at the person in front of her who was blocking her knife in surprise and couldn't say anything. The short-haired assassin was shocked when she saw that her dagger had gone into Moen instead of Cecilia. She shouted loudly, "Moen Campbell!"
My appearance prevented the short-haired assassin from stabbing the princess. While I caught the short-haired assassin, I told the princess to hurry up and kill her. After apologizing to the princess with my injuries, I lost consciousness. After opening my eyes, I found myself entering an unknown space. Just as I was still recalling what had just happened, the book of prophecy that suddenly appeared sucked me in again. The long-haired assassin was stopped by my father during her escape.
Just as Cecilia was about to be killed by the short-haired assassin, Moen rushed straight to her from the door and blocked the assassin's dagger for her. He tightly grasped the short-haired assassin's hand and dagger with both hands, preventing her from letting go. The dagger had already penetrated his chest, and blood gushed out, staining his noble clothes. When the short-haired assassin realized that Cecilia was not killed, she exclaimed in surprise, "Moen Campbell!" Cecilia, standing behind Moen, was stunned at the scene. Her body was also stained with the blood that had just splattered from him. She didn't understand why someone who poured an unknown liquid into her tea was standing in front of her now to save her. She slightly widened her eyes and trembled all over. She looked at Moen and said to him in confusion, "You, why?" Moen used all his strength to grasp the hand and dagger of the short-haired assassin. However, his trembling body and constantly losing blood also told him that there was not much strength left. He lowered his head and kept coughing, spitting out a big mouthful of blood from his mouth. He listened to Celicia's question and silently said in his heart, "Yeah, why exactly is that?" The way out was right there. Just now, while Moen was hiding behind the table observing the battle between Cecilia and the short-haired assassin, the door behind him suddenly opened. The long-haired assassin hiding in the next room stood behind the door and whispered to him, "Our goal is only Cecilia. You can go now, young Master Moen." Upon hearing these words, Moen felt both nervous and surprised. When he turned his head, the long-haired assassin was no longer behind the door. I could have stood by and watched Cecilia die. But, with a nervous expression, Moen reached into the air as if trying to push it open and escape from here. As long as he can leave this room, he will not be implicated again and can still save his hard-earned second life. As long as he leaves Cecilia here, what happened between him and Cecilia in the room just now will not be known by anyone else. However, he made another choice. I just couldn't do it. He chose to turn around and rush towards Cecilia at the fastest speed, grabbing the dagger that was aimed at her with force and stabbing himself. He recalled what had just happened, lifted his head, slowly opened his gradually blurred eyes, and forced an awkward smile. He couldn't watch a living person die in front of him. Before the short-haired assassin could react, Moen used his remaining strength to tightly grasp her hand again, preventing her from attacking Cecilia again. Now is a good opportunity to attack short-haired assassins. He bent slightly and shouted Celicia's name desperately. "Cecilia! What are you waiting for?" Cecilia was a little surprised by Moen's behavior at this moment. However, she immediately knew that he was creating an opportunity for her to kill the short-haired assassin. She couldn't think of any other way to attack the short-haired assassin besides seizing this opportunity. The short-haired assassin, who had been caught and unable to move, was very anxious at this moment. She opened her eyes wide, her expression turning fierce with anger. She tried to break free from the hand held by Moen, wanting to retreat to avoid Celicia's next attack. However, unfortunately, she only realized now that it was too late. She glared angrily at Moen and cursed him loudly. "Moen Campbell, useless playboy. How dare you!" Before the short-haired assassin could finish speaking, Cecilia had already charged towards her with a dagger. The short-haired assassin lowered her head and was shocked to see a blue shadow passing by her. She realized something was wrong, but she could no longer avoid it. Cecilia passed by the short-haired assassin with a cold expression, but the dagger in her hand was already aimed at her neck. Moen also seized the opportunity and released the hand of the short-haired assassin. The short-haired assassin, who had lost balance, fell backwards. She glanced aside and saw that Cecilia had already swung the dagger towards her neck. She said Celicia's name. "Cecilia." Cecilia didn't give the short-haired assassin a chance to continue speaking. She clenched the dagger tightly and slashed the short-haired assassin's neck with force, her movements flowing smoothly without any hesitation. After killing the assassin, she knelt down on one knee and stabilized her body. A dazzling blue light grazed the neck of the short-haired assassin, but at this moment she could no longer struggle. The short-haired assassin covered his neck in fear, constantly bleeding, trying to prevent excessive blood loss. However, all of what she did was in vain. She spat out a mouthful of blood and intermittently spoke Celicia's name. "Cecilia." Then she fell heavily to the ground and never stood up again. She held the dagger stained with blood and stood up. She turned her head, making sure the fallen assassin was no longer moving before she spoke softly. "It's over." Moen was still lying on the ground because he had no strength left to stand up. He was panting weakly, his body still trembling, and his hand was covering his bleeding chest. Seeing that the assassin had been killed by Cecilia, Moen finally breathed a sigh of relief. Cecilia knelt on one knee and looked at Moen, telling him about the situation of another assassin. Unfortunately, that assassin who was casting spells next door managed to escape. So isn't this the assassin you hired? Moen Campbell. Moen gasped for breath while intermittently answering her questions. Of course not. Cecilia asked him again about his intention to save her. Why did you save me? If I had died, no one would know about your treachery. From a rational standpoint, that would have been the best outcome for you, she said to him calmly. Moen added an unknown liquid to her tea, causing her to do something unspeakable. However, as long as Moen can run away on the spot and get her killed by the assassin, what he just did won't be known by anyone. However, he still had to run over to save her. She doesn't know why he did it. Moen looked at the ceiling. He knew he could have avoided saving her, but he felt guilty in his heart. He suffered fatal injuries in order to save her, which was also his choice. He weakly said to her, "Yeah, but that's not important anymore." Celicia's emotions are very complicated at this moment. She lowered her head and looked at Moen, who was so weak that she couldn't even say a complete sentence. Her brow furrowed slightly. Just now, you said, if you were a man, you should pursue you with dignity. Now, do I look like a man anymore, My Highness? Moen intermittently asked Cecilia, trying to get her response. However, obviously, he is about to lose his grip. As he spoke, his body kept trembling uncontrollably, and his gaze began to become increasingly unfocused. At this moment, blood was still flowing from his mouth all the way to his neck. Although he covered the wound on his chest with his hand and tried to stop the blood from flowing out quickly, it didn't seem to have any effect. The wound was still bleeding continuously, slowly staining his fingers red. Watching Moen in such a miserable state now, Cecilia closed her eyes and let out a soft sigh. By observing Moen's physical condition, she can determine that Moen's life is running out. She did not directly answer the question raised by Moen just now, but only shared her judgment with him. In 10 breaths, you will lose all your blood. You have 3 sentences left. Leave your final words. I will pass them on to the Duke and Duchess. After hearing what she said, Moen couldn't think of any last words for a moment. Actually, he doesn't have any last words to leave, because he knew that his setting in this world was just a playboy, an inconspicuous yellow-haired villain. If he dies, the world will lose a scourge like him. He slowly lifted his hand stained with blood while replying to Cecilia. No, my curse is gone. That's the best outcome for them. There's no need to leave any words for them to just think. If I must leave a last message? His hand gently caressed Celicia's injured face. Cecilia slightly widened her eyes, somewhat surprised by Moen's behavior. He used all his remaining strength to apologize for what he had done to her. Cecilia, I'm sorry, and I really like you. Moen's voice was getting lower and lower, and it was getting close to being impossible to hear what the last words he said were. However, Cecilia still listened to what he said clearly. After saying this sentence, Moen slowly closed his eyes, and his consciousness and breath gradually dissipated, until Cecilia could no longer hear his heartbeat and speech, and saw that his body was no longer making any movements. She understood that the person in front of her was already dead. As Moen had lost his strength, the hand that touched Celicia's cheek slowly fell to the ground. Cecilia still maintained a kneeling position on one knee. She looked at the hand at her feet and remained silent for a moment. After a while, Cecilia suddenly said a sentence to Moen. After doing that kind of thing to me, do you think that your life and apology can make it up to me? Moen Campbell! She called out Moen's name with an angry tone. However, a slight blush appeared on her face and her body trembled slightly. She was also unsure whether her current mood was angry because Moen failed to give her a formal apology, or moved by what Moen had just said. She placed Moen on her thigh and used her ice magic to freeze Moen's still bleeding wound, preventing further bleeding. She won't accept Moen's hasty apology and death. This won't make her forget what he did to her. She cast ice magic on him while saying to him, I do not accept your apology. You must live to atone for your sins. After an unknown amount of time, Moen slowly opened his own eyes. He found that he had fallen into an unknown space and the clothes on his body had disappeared. However, none of this mattered anymore. He was dead and the pain in his body had completely disappeared. So he casually spread his arms and legs, his body relaxing as he lay in this space. All fatigue, dizziness, and pain have disappeared. It's comfortable. It felt like the body warm. Was this what it felt like after death? He maintained this posture, closed his eyes, and recalled what had just happened. The outcome is still death, but this time it was my own choice. And before I died, I even acted handsome in front of super beautiful girl like Cecilia. No matter what I think, I haven't suffered any losses, and I even took advantage of it. However, from the results, Moen still felt a little disheartened. He sat up and scratched his head with his hand. Okay, judging from the results, this is indeed a loss. This is my hard-earned chance to be reborn. But I just couldn't be the kind of scumbag who'd take advantage of a girl and then see her to die. After all, I'm not a heartless brute like the original Moen Campbell. Just as Moen was analyzing the situation, he lowered his head and noticed a black energy ball that was constantly gathering energy. Huh? While Moen was still wondering what this was, suddenly, the black energy ball transformed into a book. This book is the prophecy book that predicted the direction of his story before. It suddenly appeared in front of him and flipped the pages wildly again. Moen was startled by it and widened his eyes.
Damn it!
At this moment, a black energy jumped out of the prophecy book. With the prophecy book constantly flipping pages, this energy slowly spread in front of Moen, forming something similar to a screen. Then, the screen slowly displayed some words. Moen held the prophecy book with both hands. He looked up at the words and then at the book in his hand, completely unaware of what the content meant. He shouted loudly, "What the hell is this?" Suddenly, the prophecy book stopped flipping pages. It stopped on one of the pages, slowly displaying text under the influence of black energy. However, some of these words are invisible. The left page says, "Keep struggling, Moen Campbell." The leaf on the right says, "For the sake of this world, my." As soon as Moen finished reading the contents of the book, the prophecy book emitted a lot of black-purple energy. It surrounded Moen and then sucked him into the book like last time. Under the influence of the black-purple energy, a part of Moen's body slowly transformed into energy that was absorbed. He exclaimed in shock, "Damn it! Just now when I was about to die, I didn't see you come out, and now you want to take me to that terrifying basement. Tiger don't show its strength. You really think I'm a sick cat?" Meow. Before Moen could finish speaking, he transformed into a white energy. This energy was sucked into the book along with the black-purple energy. The current location is in the sewer of Duke Campbell's mansion. The long-haired assassin who had just escaped cast a magic circle and teleported from the room to the sewer. She was wearing a black cloak and running frantically in the sewer. She and the short-haired assassin had failed in their mission, and this place was no longer suitable to stay for long. She felt very angry about Moen's sudden appearance, which disrupted their plan. She said through gritted teeth, "Damn it, it is so close. I should have eliminated him first, even if he wasn't the primary target, Moen Campbell. I think I heard something about what to do to my precious son." At this moment, the fleeing long-haired assassin heard a familiar voice. She widened her eyes and was somewhat surprised by the sound. Not far from her, a tall man was standing there, blocking her way. The red magical energy he emitted formed a huge red lion, making people feel very intimidated. The long-haired assassin's body couldn't help but tremble slightly when she saw this red lion. Damn it, how could he be here? Although she felt very nervous, she still pulled out 2 daggers hidden around her waist and prepared to fight. She looked at the man warily while revealing his true identity. Lionheart King, Ron Campbell. Ron walked towards her while placing his hand on his sword. "Oh? I didn't expect this guest to know about my insignificant name. But this guest, I remember the Campbell family never invited you. Why did you come uninvited?" He closed his eyes, pulled out his sword, and cast his magic. He couldn't help but get interested when he heard the long-haired assassin mention the content related to Moen just now. "Tell me well, especially the part about what you want to do to my precious son." I will definitely listen attentively. Ron opened his red eyes and pointed his sword at the long-haired assassin. He looked at her with indifferent eyes, emitting the red magical energy once again. The red lion behind him let out a roar, as if declaring war on the long-haired assassin.